It's that time of the week. Yes, this week's Cult Movie Show, your weekly look at cult movies. Please welcome your hosts, Warren and Velvet.
Yes, welcome to another podcast, another edition of the Cult Movie Show. Number 54, with myself, Warren, and that was right, wasn't it? I think. Anyway, with myself, Warren.
You got it.
And as always, the co-hostess with the mostess, Velvet. How are you today?
Awesome as always. So yeah, went to the movies today, actually, right before the show. I couldn't resist. I've been wanting to see this movie, and I was like, let me squeeze it in right quick. I went and saw Suburbicon, starring Matt Damon. Yeah, starring Matt Damon, Julianne Moore, directed by George Clooney. And I have to admit, George Clooney turned out to be quite a good director for this film. This is also written, it has like 4 writers because it's the Coen brothers. You got Joel and Ethan Coen, and also George Clooney helped to write this, as well as Grant Heslov. So you had 4 writers working on this script, which that usually spells disaster. Usually too many cooks spoil the broth in the kitchen, but this actually worked out quite well. It was a unpredictable narrative that had a really large red herring in it that you thought was leading one way, turned out to be something totally different. Matt Damon was flawless as always. And I don't want to say it's a dark comedy, but there are very, 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 very dark comedic moments in this movie. So, yeah, if you're looking for something, it is a bit of a slow burn, too. It takes a little bit to get started. So it's not boring, but you're kind of like, where's this going? What's happening? And then all of a sudden, kind of all hell breaks loose. Not quite like Heroes for Hire. There's not a ninja and a cowboy and, a Vietnam vet. But not that wild, but it's pretty intense. And it was definitely worth seeing in the theater. And if this is how George Clooney is going to be directing, I hope he does a lot more movies as a director, because there were great stylistic shots, great setups, just really beautifully shot. And then it was just this crazy, murder mystery thriller with some very, very, very dark comedic moments. So Suburbicon, I can't recommend it highly enough. Really entertaining watching the movie theater.
Well, that's really, I have to admit, I'm a big fan of Matt Damon. I never used to be. Originally, I very much had that idea of, was it, I'm Matt Damon. What was that movie?
Good Will Hunting?
No, the one with the marionettes. Remember? Team America.
Marionettes.
Team America. Where it was like, hello, I'm Matt Damon. And I did really think he was very wooden originally when in some of his earlier films, I think. But I think he's grown so much. I really love his performances now. I'm a big fan of Matt Damon. And
he has great range now. Because, if you really look at his filmography, he's to the point where he can do it all. He can do drama. He can do action. He can do comedy. He's really a multifaceted actor, and he's really good in pretty much all his performances nowadays. He's box office gold. It's to the point where if he's in the movie, I know it's going to be a good movie.
Absolutely, and he interviews so well, when he's doing the press junkets and all that sort of stuff. Like, he just seems to be having a really good time. So he seems to be a really enjoyable person, No, I'm a big fan of his. But mind you, I love George Clooney as well. I think he's great.
I do too. So he's only directing in this. I thought maybe he would pop up in the movie somewhere. No, he strictly stayed behind the camera for Suburbicon. And I was like, oh, okay. But that's important too. It's important for an actor who's going to be a director to know when to stay behind the camera if they're being a director. He didn't. Maybe there was a hidden cameo in there that I missed, but he definitely didn't put a pointless scene in there where he was talking just to be like, yeah, I'm George Clooney and I'm going to put myself in this movie too. Haha, are you excited to see me? Okay, back behind the camera. He stayed out, which I think is very, very sophisticated way for a actor to direct a movie. Like, you got to put your ego to the side and remember this movie is not about you.
Yes. But he has directed before, though, hasn't he, George Clooney?
I think so. I believe so. But this is the only one I can remember off the top of my head, which that says a lot. To me, that says a lot. That's the only one I remember, is the one I just saw today, Suburbicon.
Because I'm sure there is a black and white movie with him and, is it Richard Dreyfuss? And I'm sure that was directed by George Clooney. Anyway, I can't remember, so we won't worry about it. So, all right. So, well, that's good. I'm glad you enjoyed that. And sort of anything else? Did you sort of catch up on anything else during the week, or?
Actually, I was planning to see a completely different movie this week, an independent film. Well, let me talk about two independent films really quick. First, let me just give you guys an update on American Satan. If you don't know what I'm talking about,
yes.
listen to our last episode. Long story short, that is not playing in the mountains of Montana. American Satan is not coming to a theater near me. So
really?
I'm going to have to track that down, probably online, or wait till it becomes a physical rental, because that is not happening in the theaters in this area. And the same is to be said of another movie that just got released this weekend. It's a biopic about the serial killer Jeffrey Dahmer when he was a teenager, before he had done his first kill, called My Friend Dahmer. And I had been excited to go see this, but same story. This movie will not be playing in a theater near me. It is currently on the independent movie circuit junket, and it's in so few theaters that I'm going to have to wait until it's online or it becomes physical DVD that I can rent. I'm like, dang it.
Is this something that you found often? Is this more a regional thing, or is this more an American thing, where certain movies are seen as too controversial for mainstream cinemas to play?
So I'm not 100% sure because both these films, we have, first off, like I said, we have, Satan in the title, and it's about selling your soul for fame. And then we have the other movie, which is about a real life documented serial killer. So I don't know if it's just that these two movies happen to be independent films and they don't have distribution, and that's why they're only in select independent theaters.
Right.
Or if it is the subject matter that's too controversial for certain mainstream markets. I'm really not sure if that's what the case is for both of those.
I mean, because I would have thought that we lived in a society now, at least in the West, where films are not shown because they're controversial. We'd move past that. But then again, you never know. But then again, I was going to also say that maybe we haven't. I mean, you think about it was only a few years ago when there was, remember the boycott of the Ditzy Chicks? There were people burning their CDs and all that sort of stuff. And only just recently, there have been people publicly putting up photographs of themselves burning their football jerseys because of this thing that's going on in the United States at the moment. So maybe, I don't know, maybe we're not beyond it yet. Maybe. Yeah,
so I haven't heard anything about them being these two particular films being too controversial for the mainstream market. I think it really is just a case of money and distribution rights. Yeah. I think they're just so independent that they weren't able to land a huge distributor. And because usually when a movie is considered controversial, you hear about it all over the media, social media. You see news articles about it. And I haven't seen that with these two films. Quite the opposite. With American Satan, nobody's seen it. Whereas with My Friend Dahmer, I've heard nothing but positive reviews online. Even Rolling Stone recently gave it a very positive review. So the movie's evidently worth checking out. It's just you'll have to hunt it down to see My Friend Dahmer.
Well, I've always wondered, too, whether sometimes some of these, it's changing the subject a bit, but when people do protest films, they don't want this film being shown and stuff like that because they personally disagree with the subject matter or some such thing, I've often actually wondered whether that actually makes the film more popular.
Sometimes it does, doesn't it? Sometimes it does. Because, there have been quite a few films over the years that became so notorious that people are like, oh, I have to see this movie just because everybody said it's the grossest thing ever. It's the most shocking thing ever. And I don't know, maybe this is not the best example, but for example, Faces of Death. Everybody's like, oh my God, it's been banned in 48 countries, stuff like that. And then you watch and it's like, hey, that's a rubber monkey head.
Yeah.
You're like, hey, that's not real. So sometimes I think they just do use that sensationalism just to, any kind of press is good press, whether bad or positive, whether negative or positive. As long as you're getting press, it's, putting attention on your project. So,
yes, that is very true, isn't it? That is very true.
Yeah.
But we have some good films, I think, lined up this week. And
yes.
should we just
get
right into it, Velvet, and start with our first film?
Yeah.
All right. So this time, now this is an interesting one, from 1979 and produced by Roger Corman. So it's going to give you a bit of an idea what you're going to be in for. But it is Rock and Roll High School. And I think a lot of people will have heard of this movie before. If they haven't heard of the movie, they will have at least heard of the song.
Right.
And it's how do we describe this? It's one of those. It really is one of those movies which plays with the idea of the generation gap. Which has been done, on TV shows and on movies 1,000 times, obviously before, and probably 1,000 times since. But but it plays with that idea of the rebellion of youth with the conservatism of their parents' generation, if you like. And this movie goes down that path. So we have a high school in the United States, and what's the high school called again? It's called
I just forgot it, and they say it like a million times in the movie.
I know. I can't remember.
It's something or other high school. It's a name. Oh, I can't believe I just forgot.
Vincent Lombardi High School.
You got it. You got it.
Sorry, Vince Lombardi High School, I should say. And so anyway, they have a reputation of sending their headmasters or headmistresses. I think the headmistress is still called a headmaster. I don't know.
We actually call him a principal. We call him a principal in the United States. Yeah.
And anyway, of sending the principal insane because of their because of the students' endless love affair with rock and roll music. Yes, the evil devil music. And so a new principal comes to the school, and she is determined, with the help of two hall monitors, her little Gestapo.
I call her minions. Minions.
I was going to say her little SR. Her brown shirts. She's going to try to stamp out the love affair with rock and roll, especially at the moment the love affair with the Ramones, and hence, of course, how we get the title of the movie. The movie will basically go along the concept of the kids rebelling against the headmaster, and it follows the concept of one of our main stars, who basically she sees herself as a future songwriter, and she has written a song for the Ramones called Rock and Roll High School. So she desperately wants to go and see the Ramones in concert so she can give them her song. And of course the principal will try to stop her through various different lunatic ways, plus all the other lunacy that will happen, until she finally does manage to get to the concert. And then, of course, we will get basically a revolution in the school where the kids take over the school and rename it Rock and Roll High School, and they will battle it out with the older conservative generation. It's an interesting film, Velvet. I've got to say that. What did you think?
This is a really fun movie. If you are not a fan of the Ramones, or you're not familiar with the Ramones music, you will be a fan of the Ramones after watching this movie. I think that's one of the things I really like about this movie, is that they took an actual real-life band, featured their music, showed them performing live, and just intercut it with the story. And I love this whole fantasy world where a band you love comes to town, and whenever they come to town, okay, it's the Ramones, so what are they going to do? They're going to drive down the street playing music. Like, they have the drum set in the car, they've got the bassist and the guitarist in the car all playing their instruments, and they just have the Ramones mobile coming down the street and just to meet up with all their fans who are waiting in line to buy tickets. Like, I love all the little it's just, the music's great. Even if you're not a fan of the Ramones, I just love this whole concept that they took an actual real-life band and got them to use their music. So there's a lot of interesting stuff about who they initially chose to be the band. I'll talk more about that later.
Yeah.
But yeah, this is just such a silly movie on top of it. I think it's really funny. Obviously, some of the humor by today's standards wouldn't fly. We'll also bring that up. But it's just so much crazy stuff where, you know, people bust out in the song. Just like it's kind of like a musical, but I don't feel like this has quite the cheese of your usual musicals because you are using an actual punk band that has very famous music, very popular music, but it's not watered down like some music is in musicals because it's meant to be mass produced. And just this whole theme of, you know, fighting the establishment and teenage rebellion, and it's just bizarre, honestly. Lots of really weird, funny, quirky humor, and I just watching this movie makes me laugh, and I love all the music in the movie. And it's just interesting to see the Ramones because they're not professional actors and they're playing themselves.
And you can tell.
Exactly. Exactly.
Acting was not really their forte, I will say that.
No, not at all.
I will say that. But it still works, you know, it still definitely works. I really enjoyed it, actually. One thing I will say is I don't know if you can make these movies quite so much anymore. Because there's now... yeah, like there was always this idea of youth was rebellious and liberal, and the older generation was more stuffy and conservative, right? But in today's world, that's really different. You know, it's like there doesn't seem to be so much of a generational gap anymore. I mean, you've now got situations where the kids are more conservative than the parents. That's
true. Yeah, that is true. That does happen.
And so I think it's the Western world anyway, is changing a bit. And I'm not too sure this genre works quite as well anymore. But definitely back then, oh my God, just perfect. You know, just absolutely perfect. Even though it's so cheesy, it still works. You know, it still works really well. You know.
Yeah, and also, you know, another reason that it's so hard to make this kind of movie now is getting a band to perform in a movie and playing their own music. A lot of times bands don't own their own music anymore. So just securing the rights and then also getting the band compensated. For example, this movie was shot in 1979. They had the entire, you know, Ramones, you know, the actual band playing. They paid the Ramones $25,000 to appear in the movie. But on top of that, even though they were paid to be in this movie, they had to keep playing concerts so that they could pay their hotel bills.
Yeah.
So they took 3 weeks to shoot this movie. The Ramones had to pay their own bills. And okay, let's actually talk about who they initially wanted to be in this movie. So this movie was not originally written for the Ramones. I mean, you'll be really surprised some of the people they had originally thought of. So first off, the very first person that they actually wanted to be, it wasn't going to be a band. It was going to be a person. It was going to be Todd Rundgren, which, yeah, honestly, I had to look up who that was.
I was about to say, who is that?
Exactly. This is not somebody whose music has survived the ages, I want to say. So singer-songwriter, but yeah, he's still active today writing music. But yeah, if I say Todd Rundgren, I go, who is that? I think one of his best-known songs is Hello, It's Me. That still tells you nothing.
No.
So unless you're a Todd Rundgren fan, you're not going to know who that is. I didn't know who that is. I had to look him up, and I still don't know. I was like, I don't remember hearing any of his songs. I don't ever remember seeing him. And originally, they wanted him to be, you know, the Rock and Roll High School person, but they couldn't come to an agreement. So then the next band that they contacted was Cheap Trick. But
Right.
again, they couldn't work. Yeah, they couldn't work out an agreement that would work. Okay, so then they actually at one point thought, let's get Devo. Yes, whip it, guys. Whip it into shape,
Okay.
those guys. But again, they decided, you know what? Devo has too much of their own concept, and it just doesn't seem to work for this movie. Okay, now here's the one that I think is really funny. Okay, but I could totally see it, and they didn't do it. Van Halen, back when they had David Lee Roth. And
Right.
the reason they ended up not having Van Halen was executives over at Warner Brothers said, that band is too wild. It will be a nightmare, they said, trying to film them. Like, don't do this. So long story short, finally another executive over at Warner Brothers was like, hey, why don't you guys get the Ramones? And nobody who made this movie was familiar with the Ramones. They went and got familiar with the Ramones, and they're like, yeah, no, this band's perfect. So during this 3-week shoot, Dee Dee Ramone, the bassist, he got arrested. Okay, just in 21 days, he got arrested for fighting with a roadie. He overdosed while he was in jail, and then they had to send him to the Cedars-Sinai Hospital, and he had a $3,000 medical bill. So I mean, like,
Good God.
that was just in a 3-week shoot. So I mean, like, this band was crazy. They were stoned, doing drugs the entire time. Dee Dee Ramone, the one that kept getting arrested, kept overdosing, kept going to the hospital. He was such a bad actor that he originally had 7 lines in the movie, and they whittled it all the way down to 2 lines. He only says in the entire movie, "Hey, pizza, it's great. Let's dig in." He could not do dialogue whatsoever.
Oh, my goodness.
I think it's hilarious that they're like, oh, Van Halen's way too wild, but then they got an even wilder band.
But then they got the Ramones. Yeah, so we can't have Van Halen, they're too wild. I know, we'll get the Ramones.
We'll get a punk band that has songs like, hey, I want to sniff some glue. They'll be much calmer.
Oh, dear, that is just brilliant. I absolutely love that. I think that's absolutely brilliant. But 1979, I mean, where were the Ramones, in 1979? Were they at their peak, at this stage, or?
No, I wouldn't say they were at their peak. They were actually, at the time, they were actually recording an album. The album was End of the Century. And so, I mean, the Ramones are one of these bands that they've been around forever, but they never hit that like total stardom. They never had a number one hit. They never got rich off of it. They didn't make any fucking money until a car commercial. You'll have to forgive me. I forget which brand, but a car brand licensed one of their songs, Blitzkrieg Bop, in one of their commercials. That was the first time the Ramones made fucking like actual money that they could so they could retire and stop touring, because they were always touring nonstop, just making ends meet, playing their music. And they had this cult following fan base, but they weren't at that level that they were actually making money. They weren't rich. They were always paying to tour, stay in hotels and having to pay for food, and just like always touring, never making enough money. And it wasn't until finally a commercial played one of their songs and paid them enough to use the song that they actually retired from touring. It was just crazy.
Because it is interesting that, like if you ever hear anyone talk about the history of punk music, one of the first bands that gets mentioned all the time is the Ramones.
Yes.
Yes. Because they were there. Well, they were there really at that start, that creation of punk, weren't they? I mean,
yes.
With what was the club, the
CBGBs.
Yes. And so they were, because that's the thing, that there's a lot of people who think that punk rock is a British creation, and it's not at all. It's an American West Coast. Sorry, not West Coast, East Coast, New York. Sort of thing, isn't it? I mean, that was the creations of it. That's my understanding, anyway.
Right on.
Not that
I love that.
You know, I don't know a lot about it, but anyway. But I think they worked pretty well. And we have everything in this. A bit like we spoke before about the burning of the CDs. We have the record burning, you know, in this movie. You know, it's a bit like, you know, the principal is there with her brown shirts, the hall monitors, you know, and they're burning the records.
Doesn't that just make you think of Nazism? I'm like,
well, I think that's the whole. I think that's the whole idea. I mean,
absolutely.
You know, I mean, I think the whole idea was having her, you know, as this almost dictatorial principal, and her hall monitors were in the, you know, in the brown shirts with the crossover belt, you know, across their chest,
Yes.
and having the little symbols on their arm which said what HM. Instead of like a swastika. I mean, it's obviously, you know, it's a statement about fascism. I mean, it is. And then when they're there burning the records, well, that's the book burning, you know, and all the rest of it.
Right.
But as we said before, still happening today. Just, you know, it's not books, it's records. It's CDs. Yes. They're still doing it, you know. But I thought that worked really well. You know, I thought that worked really well. But I do, you know, absolutely love the way they just cruise around in this car, and I mean, they've got enough electricity to run the amps and all the rest of it.
I love that. I think it's so funny. Yeah, I love how, like, in any typical musical, you have people just spontaneously bursting in the song and dance. And I'm like, how fun would that be to go to a high school where when you burst in the song and the dance, it's actually rock music. It's not, you know, cheesy pop musical music. Like, I was like, that would be really fun. But I just love this whole fantasy that the Ramones just walk around singing and playing their guitars and drums everywhere they go.
Yes, I know.
I was like, I love that. I think it's really funny. Back to the principal. She makes a great villain in this. She's a real hard ass. She even has a really tight hairdo. She has actually really annoying hair this entire movie. She always over enunciates, speaks very clearly, like everything's a serious, and, you know, rock and roll is just pretty much the devil. Just really all the characters in this movie are very quirky. Like, we have Clint Howard, it's always fun to see Clint Howard, and he is, I think his character is hilarious in this. So he's called Eagle Bauer, and he's basically the go-to guy in the school. If you want drugs, if you want a date, if you need test answers, he can help you out. And he's like so prolific in the high school as being the go-to guy that he actually has his own office in a men's room stall in the men's restroom in the high school.
Yes.
And people have to take a number and stand in line to be seen. And he has a secretary. And
I do believe that. He's got a secretary. He's actually got a secretary.
So it's very, very funny. And then we have the two girls. We have, you know, Riff Randall, who is our, you know, obsessive, you know, Ramones fan, songwriter. And then her friend is the complete opposite. She's like this total sweet, kind of innocent nerd character, but she's like majoring in nuclear physics.
Yes, at high school.
Nuclear physics in high school.
Yes.
So she knows how to make bombs. That will be very important later in the movie. And
yes.
And then, like, the captain of the football team, you never see this kind of character. I think this is a great character because it's always the stereotype of the captain of the football team is the guy that has it going. He's athletic, he's handsome, he's popular. Well, this guy's athletic and handsome, but he's not really popular. He's a total fucking dork. Every time he tries to talk to girls, he talks about the weather, and they're just like, oh, has no sex appeal, doesn't know how to score with the ladies. So he has to go to Eagle Bauer, the go-to man, to try to set up a date and to learn how to get laid. So what do you think of these characters, Warren?
I thought they were, look, they were stereotypical, been done before, but they worked. You know,
yes.
They worked. They worked in the concept of the film, and the way it all ties together. I mean, the idea that we have the girl who's like the ugly duckling, the Cinderella type, who becomes beautiful in the end, and she will end up with the jock, if you like. But then again, they turn the jock around, so he's he's got an issue, which is kind of like I thought that was well done. And then we've just got the coolest chick on campus, and she just doesn't give a shit. All she wants to do is listen to music, and I think it all comes together. It sounds silly when you explain it. Like, right. I think when you had been pitching this, it would have been a bit like, explain that again. How does this work? The jock isn't popular.
Right.
Doesn't the sexy cool chick have a guy in her life? Why is the sexy cool chick single?
Because she's saving herself for Joey Ramone.
Yes.
Which, oh my God, okay, we have to talk a little bit about Joey Ramone. Okay, lead singer of the Ramones. If you guys have never listened to the Ramones, go Google picture, look at these guys. Poor Joey Ramone had to be a rock star. He had to be. Yeah. Because he was just such a weird-looking dude. He had to find a way to, get people to just fall in love with him. Just such an odd-looking fella, really tall, really skinny, just not an attractive guy. I have to say it. It's not very nice, but I have to say, not an attractive looking guy. But he had that rock star appeal, so you can forgive if he's not the most good looking guy. His pants in this movie, okay, it looks like he pissed himself. Okay, dude, I know you're not in the habit of probably staring at men's crotches, Warren, but did you notice?
I did notice pants? There was something a bit strange. I didn't know whether they were just coloured that way or if that
I think they're just coloured that way, but I'm like, damn, it looks like you pissed your pants this entire movie. And this is totally unsubstantiated. I heard Howard Stern mentioning this. Shock Jocks Howard Stern mentioning this about Joey Ramone back in the day when he'd had Joey Ramone on the radio show with him a couple times. Evidently, Joey Ramone had 2 rows of teeth. Again, this guy had to be a rock star because he was just an odd-looking dude.
Yeah.
He was just an odd-looking dude. That may be, not true, and he wasn't saying it as a joke. Evidently, for some reason, Joey Ramone had some strange anatomy going on. Okay. But yeah, very strange guys. So the entire time you're saying, okay, Riff Randall, this teenage girl, she's a hot rocker chick. Why doesn't she have a boyfriend? Because she's got a crush on Joey Ramone. But I'm like, no, but okay, we have to talk about her fantasy scene because that's kind of weird.
That was I do wonder. This is where Roger Corman came in. It was. It was a little bit like, all right, well, we've got this movie about this rock band and this teenage high school, but there's no sets, guys. There's no sets. We've got to bring some sex into
sex.
it.
There's no sex, no nudity.
So we've got her running around in her underwear, dancing to the Ramones, who are playing a song in her bedroom. It is really, look, I won't say it's creepy, but I will say it's a bit weird. I don't know, am I wrong in saying it's a bit weird?
I agree 100%. Even by 1979, 1980 standards, I'm kind of wondering how they got away with this, how nobody thought this was strange. It may have been just one of those moments where in real life this girl was not a teenager. So it's kind of easy for people to forget when they're making the movie that, hey, this girl's supposed to be most likely 16, 17. She should not be dancing in her underwear with 4 guys in her room.
No, and not only that, she then takes them into the shower and dances in the shower while they're sitting in the shower playing their instruments and singing along with her in the shower.
So this is supposed to be her fantasy. Now, I get that it's a teenage fantasy, but unfortunately we're seeing this fantasy, and it's awkward for the viewer. It's very strange. And, I mean, and Joey Ramone's really getting in her face and singing this song, and it always looks like they're getting ready to kiss. And I read an interview with PJ Souls, the one that plays Riff Randall, our teenage girl in her underwear, dancing around the Ramones. And she was saying how awful it was filming that scene because everybody thinks it's supposed to be all romantic and this teenage girl's fantasizing about hanging out with this rock band and the lead singer that she's got a crush on. But in real life, Joey Ramone was singing in her face and spitting all over her face during that while they were filming that, and she just had to act like she was so in love.
Oh, God. Oh, but yes.
Yeah. There's a couple of other non-PC kind of things that you really just couldn't get away with in cinema today. For example, there's a Native American joke
Oh, yes.
That's the ticket scalper, which is somebody who buys tickets at regular price and then resells them at really unfair high prices. They call it scalping. So they had a ticket scalper. So then all of a sudden they showed a Native American ticket scalper because, of course, all Native Americans scalp people. Ha ha, get it? Very funny. No, it's not actually. It's really racist.
I know.
Not politically correct by today's standards, but that joke is in the movie. And I was honestly a little disturbed by this one, too. And this comes up again in so many movies. And even in modern movies, sometimes this will happen, that we have Tom, that's our unhip, football captain, talking to Eagle Bauer, our go-to guy. And, Eagle Bauer's trying to teach him how to score with the ladies. They are talking about getting girls drunk and then having sex with them. I mean, that's rape, people. That's rape.
I know.
We have a rape joke in this movie, so...
I know. It is a bit uncomfortable when you really think about it, isn't it? I mean,
yes.
It's like the way that I'm going to teach you to get a girlfriend is to basically knock her out and then have sex with her.
Yes, get her drunk and rape her. Get her drunk and rape her.
I mean, this is Bill Cosby stuff, for God's sake. You know what I mean? If you...
and that's rape culture at the time. For even now, a lot of times you'll hear people that think it's okay to get somebody drunk and have sex with them. It's really baffling that this is still really prevalent, at least in American society. You will hear people say stuff, and it's like, no, and people just have to be educated.
Well, unfortunately, I think throughout the world there's still this idea that men rule the world and women are just the objects of men. Unfortunately, it just still exists. I mean, and there are people who have great power and influence who actually peddle this shit still.
Yes.
Yes. We don't need to talk about what's been going on recently. I mean,
exactly.
It seems to just be... It's never gone away. I mean, yes, we talk about how the fact that it's not acceptable, but it's still there. It's horrible. It's absolutely horrible, and it is. But then again, I mean, I suppose we have to put it into context. It is 1979.
Right.
I mean, it's as wrong as it is. It was a little bit like where. You go back far enough, people are wearing blackface in movies, Yes. I mean, I don't actually think it necessarily means that anyone who has ever written that sort of material or acted with that sort of material believed in any of that stuff. But obviously the writers did.
Right.
Obviously,
some reason, a long time people are just like, oh, we're going to get the girl's chick and then we're going to score, man. Yeah. And even Clint Howard goes... taking turns. I'm like, oh my God. Oh God,
yeah, I know.
And then they cut away and do something else. I'm like, because that's the fucked up thing. It's like, they're not trying to be creeps. This was just the mentality of the time is, that's what we do. We invite them over for a drink, we get them drunk, and then we're going to score. It's like, no, dude, you're going to rape them. You don't know you're raping them, but that's what you're going to be doing.
Yes, so, I know.
Yeah. So I just had to throw that out there. There's a lot of non-politically correct stuff in here that it's just the ravages of time. You're going to watch some of this stuff and be like, what the fuck?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
In a movie that's supposed to be more or less marketed towards teenagers because, again, it's Rock and Roll High School. It's the last 4 years of our public education system, and people are still young. They're ranging from ages 14 all the way up to 18. And but that
also brings up the other thing. We have one character, the freshman. Right?
Oh.
Now, I need you as an American to explain to me, as someone who never went through an American school system, what the fuck is a freshman?
Okay, so a freshman is the person who's just entered the last 4 years of our public education system. That is ninth grade. So you have 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th grade, ninth grade. And they're considered the bottom of the social totem pole. And it just depends on where you are within the United States, but there are a lot of hazing rituals for people just entering that part of the school system, and they are called freshmen. And there's always the running joke that the person at the top, which would be 12th grade or our seniors beat up freshmen, steal their lunch money, humiliate them, haze them, bully them. Obviously, again, nowadays we have so much anti-bullying campaigns going on, and people are trying to educate people to just be nice to each other. Don't pick on people because they're younger than you and smaller than you. And but that was very much a part of the culture. Even when I went to high school, it wasn't as prevalent. You had a couple people that are like, "Oh, I can't talk to you because you're a freshman."
God.
So and they really play it up in this movie. They have the poor guy. They shove him in a locker. They dip him upside down in a urinal, and they're like, flush it. And then at one point, they even have him in a giant pot, and they're cooking him.
Yes.
Because why? Because he's a freshman. That's what you do. And it's actually funny because
you take them to the school kitchen and cook them.
Of course not in real life.
I was about to say, that's another movie within itself, isn't it?
But I love that. Towards the end of the movie, you see the freshman going over to Eagle Bauer, our go-to guy, and he's going to enlist Eagle Bauer's services to become a cool dude, even though he's a freshman. Very cultural, very high school in America.
But the only thing I wanted to point out about that is the freshman looks like he's the oldest kid in school. Was that just me? He looks like
I think it was just bad casting.
He looks about 30. Like,
yeah, he definitely did not look like a freshman. Yeah, that was just bad casting.
Well, I actually wonder if that was done intentionally as a bit of a
probably.
joke. It's like we'll cast the supposed youngest person in school as the oldest person in the cast. Like, I just wondered whether that was done intentionally as a joke.
That makes sense, because that is funny. Seeing just like this big adult being the freshman, and he's getting beat up on and picked on. And there's also even a little animal cruelty in this movie. I mean, why leave it at, racism and rape jokes? We got to have a little bit of animal cruelty. We got a poor little mouse being held by the tail. I don't think mice like that very much. And then this mean principal plays Ramones music and makes the little mouse blow up. And then they even discriminate against the mouse when it wants to go to the Ramones concert, because mice have a tendency to explode at these concerts. But
I had to say the mouse thing. The principal comes up with this theory that to prove that rock music is bad by playing the Ramones to a group of mice who explode, and so this is proof that rock music is bad. But then at the concert, we see this giant 6 foot tall, 2 meter tall mouse try to enter the Ramones concert, and the guy at the door sort of goes, no, you can't come in. We've had too many problems with mice exploding at the concert. And it's like, what, you get lots of mice, 6 foot tall mice come into your concert? But it's like
that mouse was prepared. He brought ear protection, so he was allowed to enter the concert.
But then later on, we see another 2 meter tall mouse who comes to the school and says, no, you can't raid the school. My children are in there. And he's talking about all the little mice in the biology lab. It's like, it's like, do you not realise that your children are in there for scientific experiments? It's like, oh my God.
Yeah, it's just such a weird movie, because it has that unrealistic humor, just these random strange characters. Just, but I love the whole mouse gag. I think that's really funny. What did you think of seeing the Ramones perform live? Did you like that part of the movie, or did you think that ran too long?
Well, look, I thought it ran a bit too long. They started going through various songs. The other thing too is that I actually quite like the Ramones music. I'll be honest with you. I think the music's actually pretty good. But the thing but this is just for me personally. I've never been a fan, generally, of rock bands live, because just seeing people play guitars and sing is kind of dull I just don't like. For instance, you take someone like, I don't know, Beyonce or Britney Spears or someone like that. Okay, I don't particularly like their music, but holy shit, they put on an amazing performance. Do you know? You're right.
Well, pyrotechnics, choreography, outfits,
and this is always a problem that I've sort of had with live music, is that I just don't. And this is just me. I know that I'm in the minority on this. I fully accept I'm in the minority, but I just think rock band performances are dull live. That's all I'm trying to say. So for me, watching it, it was a bit like, well, all they're doing is just standing on stage, playing guitars and singing. They're not doing anything. And it gets, I don't know, it's.
No, I totally get what you're saying. It's definitely an acquired taste. Not everybody likes live rock music for that reason that you say. And also at the time that this movie came out, I think this was probably a big deal to see a band perform live. Like now you and I, there's so much variety for entertainment that we're spoiled by choice that, if we have the choice between seeing somebody put on a real show with, choreography and pyrotechnics and light shows, and I mean, just like the whole shebang, as opposed to a rock band just standing and playing their instruments and singing, it does seem a little dull. Although, hey, at the same time, wait a minute, they are performing. They, wrote this music, they're singing, but unfortunately, it doesn't have the same visual stimuli. So I totally get what you're saying. I totally get what you're saying. I
mean, I'll tell you a story. When I was, I don't know how old I was, 15 or 16 or something like that, I went with a group of friends to see The Clash. I don't know if anyone remembers The Clash, and another punk band, basically, and went to see them at a place in Melbourne called Festival Hall. Anyone who was brought up in Melbourne gets that joke. Anyway, it's this Saturday night at Festival Hall was the way they used to do the advertising. And because that's where they also used to do the wrestling, that live wrestling.
Okay.
Yeah. So, And anyway, so I went to see them and everything. I was so excited because I had all their albums and stuff, and I was really excited. And I was bored shitless when I was there. I really was. Because they didn't do anything.
That's a shame.
But they weren't meant to do anything. That's the whole point. It's like, so that's why I just get. I mean, I've got a really dear friend who, and they, I still remember. They were a huge alternative music fan. Loved alternative bands and that sort of thing. Went to see all of them and all the rest of it. And he got this girlfriend at the time, and she was a huge Bananarama fan. Do you remember Bananarama?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, right.
Oh, yeah.
And anyway, and he goes, I do not want to go and see Bananarama. He wanted to go and see, some indie band or something like that, right? So anyway, she drags him along to go and see Bananarama. And anyway, and I spoke to him the next day, and he said, this is when I was at university, and I said, what was it like? And he goes, Warren, you won't believe it. It was the best concert I've ever been to. And I said, what do you mean it's Bananarama? Right? I mean, I'll be honest with you, I like Bananarama, but that's not the point. He didn't. And I said, how did you possibly enjoy, 2 hours of Bananarama? And he goes, they never stood still once. Like they were just on them. It was a huge, and he said, I've never seen a concert that was a stage show before.
Oh, okay.
And I said, oh, wow, there you go. So, yeah. I mean, I'll be honest with you. If I had gone to see Frank Sinatra when he was alive, I would have been bored.
Oh, yeah.
It's just listening to a record. Someone's just standing there, Anyway, we are digressing a little bit so much.
No, it's totally on point, because I forgot how much Ramon's music and performance is actually in this film. And as I was saying before, I think at the time this must have been a really big deal, actually, because it was still a big deal for bands to release live albums that actually see filmed performances. Because I remember Kiss was the first band, I believe the first rock band to release a live album, and that was huge at the time. That's like, hey, if you can't come to the concert, buy this album, you can hear us live and have a concert in your home.
Yeah.
So, I mean, like, obviously our technology and entertainment has changed, and now we're not that easily amused, I guess. But I think at the time, this was probably a huge deal, especially for people who were actual Ramones fans that never had the chance to see them in concert. Now they could see them performing in this movie. So, I mean, but at the same time, it's an acquired taste. If you don't like live rock performances, this might run a little long for you, because it shows them actually performing a concert. They do about 3 or 4 songs, and then they get back into the story. So,
well, here's the other thing. In the United States, for the sort of places the Ramones would have been playing at the time, would you have needed to have been 18 or 21 to have got in?
Oh God, yeah, I think so. Or even if they didn't have an age restriction, I don't think your parents wanted you going to that shit, because they knew there would be underage drinking and drugs and just people, dancing around, hitting each other, picking fights for fun. I mean, I don't think it would have been a child safe environment.
But here you go. Here's an opportunity for a 16-year-old to see the Ramones playing.
Right. Yeah.
So
totally.
that's kind of interesting, if they're not able to see them, like if they can buy their records but they can't see them live, at least here is at least some sort of concert footage of them.
Right. Oh, okay. One more thing. Okay. Again, like, the more I love this movie, the more I look at it, I'm like, okay, again, this is one of those movies that it's rock and roll high school, but damn, is this really supposed to be for teenagers? Because there's a very explicit scene of a roadie, doing cocaine. I mean,
yes.
You see him snorting lines. And I'm kind of like, okay, all right. Again, okay, that happened. That happened.
I mean, I don't actually know how this film was rated when it was released.
Good question.
It's
funny. It actually has a PG rating, which makes sense, because I mean, parental guidance, but. Yeah. You know what? Parents, if you sit down and watch this one with your kids, really sit down and watch this one with your kids.
But I mean, in a sense that I suppose it's a drug joke, isn't it? It's like
right.
I mean, I suppose we do drug jokes all the time now, I don't know. It's interesting. Because when you take that into account with the bedroom fantasy scene, with the date rape talk and all the rest of it, I suppose watching someone snort cocaine is not really that.
It all just goes together, doesn't it? Jesus.
I mean, Jesus.
But this movie does have great nostalgia for for anybody who actually remembers having cassette tapes and having music on vinyl on records, because you see a lot of that in here. You actually see records, you see cassette tapes. And I mean, it's really fun to see that and remember how, I used to not be able to listen to whatever I wanted to whenever I wanted to, because even if I had the record or the tape of the band, I couldn't skip to the song I wanted to. I had to fast forward or rewind, and that took fucking forever. And then, like, you would rewind, and then you would start to be at the end of the song. Then you'd rewind some more. Then it'd be at the end of the song before the song you wanted to listen to. So you're always going back and forth trying to just get to the song you wanted to listen to. And then with records, you would scratch them accidentally so many times and just totally fuck up the sound. It would skip, it would crackle and fizz and just...
But there was, I have to admit though, I do remember when auto winders were available on cassette, which would, you'd press there was the short or the long fast or rewind, and the long one would take you to the next track because it would detect the breaks between the songs. And but I also remember, I mean, going and as a teenager buying records, I remember that was a really big deal because you had to physically go somewhere, you had to buy it, and they were big too. It wasn't
yes.
And the other thing too is that when you brought them home and you opened them up, it was like, that feeling when you buy a brand new car. It's got that smell to it. They call new car smell. Records had the same thing. They had a smell. They had a brand new smell, which when we moved to CDs, that didn't exist. That just didn't exist. And now with basically downloads, well, you press a button and it's there.
Yeah, and also opening up some of those albums, like the artwork and the liner notes. And just like, it was really such a personal experience. It was just like, because you were opening up and you're looking at this artwork, and sometimes they had stuff written to the fans, or they would tell you about what the story behind the song is, or what the theme of the album is. I mean, like, they really communicated with the purchaser, with the consumer, with the fan back then. Whereas, as you said, now we just download a song. And as much as I love Beck's new album, I would love to have that physical medium where I can open it up and see all the pictures and have all the lyrics printed instead of having to go online, to look at this stuff now. So, it's nostalgia. So this movie makes you very nostalgic if you remember those type of music mediums and if you enjoyed those type of music mediums. So if you've grown up without them and you've never seen them, you're probably not going to give a shit. You're just going to be like, glad I don't have to deal with that.
And here's a bit of see if you remember this from the movie Velvet, is that when the principal is testing rock music on the mice to prove how bad it is, if you notice on the sound meter, it doesn't go like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. It rates it in bands. Did you notice that? It rated it in bands. Now, did you see who the second, and the Ramones were number 10 at the top? But did you notice who the second band was?
Oh, I forgot. Who was it? Because they had Led Zeppelin. They beat out Led Zeppelin. They beat out quite a few bands.
What you said before, who is it, is very close.
Van Halen?
No, The Who. It was The Who.
Oh, The Who. The Who. There you go.
So they listed The Who as the second most divisive band in history.
This movie has lots of great little, just when you watch it, there's all kinds of weird, funny things going on. And it's really fun to watch. A lot of weird, funny stuff. Poor Togar. Okay, this principal, towards the end, I actually feel kind of bad for her, because I'm like, this lady has only been a principal for a couple of days. I mean, if you really look at this movie, she was only a principal for like maybe a week at the most. And then like the school gets fucking blown up.
Yeah. What did you... I was just
go ahead.
No, you finish. Sorry.
I was going to say, can you imagine the real life consequences of actually like taking over a school and blowing up a school nowadays? Oh my
God, you'd have the president tweeting about terrorism. I mean, it'd be, but it was but it was also a bit of a fantasy, wasn't it, to take over the school when you're a student?
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. This movie was not meant to be taken literally, obviously.
No.
Hopefully not, because it's got some fucked up shit in it.
But
go ahead.
No. I keep cutting you when you're halfway through. Sorry.
Oh no, you're fine. Actually, it's pretty interesting because I was actually kind of wondering about the pyrotechnics in this movie, because they looked pretty convincing, and I was like, it looked like they're actually blowing this school up, like for real.
Yeah.
And I went and found some trivia. It was actually a school that had been defunct since 1976. It had been defunct 3 years at that point, and they actually managed to find this school, and it was scheduled for demolition. And so they actually were able to film this demolition for this high school takeover for the movie. And I thought that was amazing. And they actually blew it up around like 3 a.m.
Yes.
And it scared the shit out of like all the people in like neighboring neighborhoods. They're like, what the fuck's going on? What's blowing up? But yeah, I thought that was amazing. It was Mount Carmel High School in South Central Los Angeles. And I was like, oh wow, they actually did blow up a fucking school.
Well, you imagine there's no way known in hell that they could blow up a school at 3 a.m. now. You'd never get away with that now. I mean, it's just, no. Twitter would have a meltdown. Twitter would just basically explode, literally. I mean, you'd never get away with that now. But I was going to ask you, what did you think about the music teacher?
Oh my God, they managed to convert the music teacher.
Yeah.
Originally, he's all about Beethoven and Mozart, like all the classical music. And they managed to get him to go to a Ramones concert, and he becomes totally converted. And like towards the end of the movie, he rips off his, uniform, and he's wearing a Ramones t-shirt.
I mean, I have to admit that final scene where he's dancing with our main character.
She's like ripping off his clothes again.
And I sort of thought, hang on a second, once again now. So now we've got this 16-year-old girl ripping the clothes off a 40 to 50-year-old man. So, oh God, where are we going
there's
here?
a lot of weird stuff in this movie.
You know?
Again, I'm like, did they just forget that this was supposed to be teenagers? So maybe it should have been more like Rock and Roll College, instead of Rock and Roll. Maybe that would have been more appropriate.
I don't know. It's I don't know, but it's I don't know. I mean, I don't know. Are we just getting too sensitive to this stuff these days, or is it that a lot of this stuff is wrong? I mean,
I think we're just more culturally aware now. I mean, statutory rape, rape. Non-consensual sex because somebody's intoxicated is rape, drug use, girls dancing in their underwear around adult men. I mean, I don't think we're being overly sensitive. I think boundaries exist for a reason. Yeah. But that's what makes this movie such a gem, is that we didn't have all of this what's now considered common knowledge. You just won't see this kind of stuff in movies. Or if you do see it in movies, you're not going to see all of them in the same movie. You might see one or two things, but all the things we've listed off, you're not going to see all of that in one movie.
I think that's pretty true. That's pretty true. I think it's kind of all right when it's in context to the time. But if you started doing it now, it would seem really spooky.
Exactly. Okay, and you mentioned this once, but this is totally just, I have to bring it back to the Ramones because I think this is so funny. Even though it's weird, even though that scene is totally weird when she's in her bedroom having a fantasy scene that the Ramones are playing in her bedroom and she's in her underwear dancing, and then she goes to the shower and Dee Dee Ramone, the bassist, is in the shower running, pouring water all over him, and he's playing the bass in the shower.
I know.
I think that is so funny. And he, you know what? I think anybody else would be like, I ain't fucking doing that. They would just be pissed off. And he just looks so happy. He's totally into it.
I know.
But then again, he had a naked girl or half naked girl in front of him, so why wouldn't he be into it? I don't know. It's a strange scene. But it's really a fun movie. But yeah, it's a gem because again, this is one of those movies, they don't make them like this anymore at all.
No, not at all.
For good reason, I guess. For good reason in most cases.
Or if they do make them like this, they do them now as send-ups. Rather than, where they send up this sort of behaviour rather than saying it's normal. I think that's maybe the difference.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, if we're going to rate Rock and Roll High School, how are we going to rate it, Velvet?
Okay, if you're a fan of musicals, you should definitely see this one. This one's a little different than your standard musical. It does, although you have people spontaneously busting into song and dancing, they are using an actual band. They're actually using rock music, / punk music. The actual band members in there, I think that alone is really fun, really cool. Lots of interesting humor. Some things you may find offensive. Some things you may totally not even notice, and only because we pointed it out would you notice. It's a gem, politically incorrect, tons of fun. I'm going to give this, out of a possible 5 Eric Roberts, I'm going to give this 4 Ramones.
Oh, right. Well, I don't know. There's something about this film I really like, and there's something about this film I really don't like. And I don't know quite what it is. So, look, I'm going to give it 3 out of 5.
Okay.
Because I did enjoy it. I did laugh a couple of times, I have to admit. I did actually find all that mouse stuff trying to get into the Ramones concert kind of funny. I'll give it 3 out of 5. I'll give it 3 out of 5.
Right on.
Excellent. All right. Well, we're going to take a quick break, and we're going to be right back with You Know What.
It's time to get excited, short film fans. It's mini movie review time.
It most definitely is. And you have found us another little gem, Velvet.
All right, so this week our mini movie is O Negative. This is by a Canadian production company called Candles Are for Burning. It is written and directed by Stephen McCarthy. At the end, I will let you guys know where you can watch this as well as where to follow them on their social media. So this mini movie runs just under 15 minutes. It has almost no dialogue. There are only 2 lines in the entire short film. Beautifully shot, very atmospheric, great use of music. What's it about? It's about what some people are willing to do for someone that they love. Or is it lust? Are they willing to feed that hunger to keep the relationship alive? I'm so punny. I'm so good at this. No, but I think it's safe to say I don't think I'm spoiling it too much. If I do say, I think we can say this is a vampire story. What did you think of this short film?
Look, I quite liked it. I thought it was maybe about 5 minutes too long. I think 10 minutes it's about 14, 15 minutes, I think.
Yes.
I think it would have maybe fitted better into that sort of 10-minute sort of slot. Because some of the scenes are a little bit drawn out, I thought. But I did really like it. Yes, definitely. I think using the word vampire is being very fair. And yes, the whole concept, it's a little bit like, I don't know, I see a lot to it actually. It's like, are there statements about cross-cultural, cross-religious relationships? In other words, what would you do to be with the person you love if that person is so totally different to what your world is? What levels will you go to? It's a really interesting little film. I quite liked it.
I love that you said that, Warren, because this mini movie reminds me a lot of how I imagine the ending or the future of Let the Right One In or Let Me In, the American version. Let the Right One In is the Swedish version, the original, and it's a vampire story. And when the movie ends, I don't want to spoil it for anybody who hasn't seen it, but long story short, what happens in this mini movie is how I imagine what happens to the 2 main characters of those films. Because they start off in that film as children.
Yes.
And now in this mini movie, you have an adult situation that plays off of that whole, what if you date somebody or are in love with somebody who can't eat food, who needs something else to sustain life, different from what you need. I guess an interspecies relationship, maybe that's what we could say. We're going to have to review Let the Right One In one of these days because I love that movie, and this really felt to me almost like a continuation of that. Not that I'm saying that this is unoriginal. I'm not saying that they ripped off that story, not at all. It's just, to me, it almost seems like they could be in the same universe of these relationships where humans have relationships with people that require a different form of sustenance to survive.
Well, this is also interesting. I mean, if we look at the TV, what was the TV series about vampires and it had werewolves in it? And
True Blood.
True Blood. Okay, True Blood. And but in that, vampires are all portrayed as generally always being like they can survive. It's like they're a predatory species.
Right.
Where in this, I don't see that. Just because somebody, let's say, is a vampire or some such thing, it doesn't necessarily mean that they're predatory.
Right.
I mean, like for instance, if you want to put it into another analogy, it's a bit like humans, for argument's sake. We're a predatory animal, okay? We're a well, originally, we're omnivores, so
right.
It's maybe not a good analogy. A dog. Let's look at a dog, okay? Okay, a dog, because it simply was a dog is a carnivore, okay?
Right.
However, you look at domestic dogs. They rely on somebody else for their support, for their health, their well-being, right?
Yes, that's true.
So it's do you get where I'm going with all of this? Where I see it
It's
a bit more like that. I suppose what I was trying to say is...
oh, no, go ahead.
So I was just going to say is it possible that you could have a vampiric type species that isn't aggressive, that isn't a hunter?
Exactly.
Because, I don't know, it brings up all sorts of interesting ideas, is all I'm trying to say.
Yeah, no, I totally get where you're going with that, because bringing it back to the dog analogy, whenever people talk about, dog psychology and dog behavior and the relationship of domesticated dogs with humans, it's oftentimes described as a parasitic relationship. The dog relies on its human host for sustenance. So this mini movie doesn't have anything to do with dogs, not really, although there is a dog actually in this mini movie.
Yes.
Uh-oh. If that piqued your interest, you guys should watch this. But yeah, again, this could be considered possibly a parasitic relationship, that this person relies on their host, or in this case, their lover or partner, to survive. So...
Well, it's a bit like you think about a relationship between humans and animals. Well, that's no, I need to go a bit deeper than that. Let's just stick with the dogs, okay, for the moment.
Okay.
Humans and dogs. It's like we all actually benefit from the relationship. Like, for instance, dogs are given a guaranteed source of food, of sustenance,
shelter, love,
shelter. They get all of this. They all, but the other thing they also get is extended life. This is something that a lot of people forget about. Wolves in the wild do not live 15 years.
Right.
Okay. Whereas a Labrador will. But then on the other side, what do we get? Well, going back in time, we used to get hunting assistance. We used to get defense. Like, dogs could be used for defense of villages and so forth. But the other thing that really today, what we get is unconditional love, right? Which is something that there's very few relationships, in a sense, where you get unconditional love that you do from a pet.
That's
from
so
owning,
true.
A pet. So it's sort of, it works both ways. But, so with this, I'm sort of wondering, it's a little bit like she gets her substance, he gets love, but there's a bit more to it than just that as well, because she gets, I don't know. The problem is, I really think I'd need hours to talk about this in depth, and for something which is just such a 15-minute movie where we don't really want to give the ending away.
Right.
It's very difficult to really get into the nuts and bolts of what I think is going on,
Absolutely.
And all I'm doing is...
It's extremely thought-provoking. It's extremely thought-provoking, and I really love what little glimpse, like, it's a slice of life. It's only a little glimpse of what's going on in this relationship, But
here's another thing, though, to think about. It's a little bit like, if you're, let's say, your partner, let's say, was developed some sort of disease, really horrible disease, and the only way to keep them alive was by illegal activity, all right?
Right.
Would you do that? Would you become a criminal to keep your partner alive?
That does happen. This is very relatable. I mean, obviously, hopefully this mini movie is a fantasy element of that situation, we hope. But no, I mean, this is a very relatable story. You can really apply that to anything. Like, people that are like, hey, so-and-so needs a lung transplant, and I know somebody who can get her one in a third world country, but I need $10,000. They go rob a bank. I mean, this stuff does happen. That obviously sounds more like a movie, but my point being, people will commit crimes to help people they love.
Yes. Yeah. Or even to other extents, it's like the idea of, would you kill somebody in order to save somebody else's life?
Right.
Right.
Course,
so in other words, so you have a situation where one person has to die, but you make the decision who it is.
Wow.
So that's an interesting concept, even with this film.
Yes.
Where you're choosing to take others' lives to keep another life. Yeah, it's really interesting ideology. This movie, for something with virtually no dialogue, is really brings up some really amazing little points of interest.
Yes, absolutely. And it's won quite a few awards as well, and understandably so, because, yeah, it's beautifully shot. Right from the beginning, they give you a little hint what you're getting into. For a moment, there's a bit of a red herring. You think that one of the people is very sick. And so you think this person's just trying to like get medicine or something for them.
Yeah.
But then, yeah, I don't want to tell too much more. I really want you people to check out this beautiful short. So again, the production company based in Canada, they are called Candles Are for Burning, and you can follow them on their Twitter. I'm going to give you 2 Twitter addresses, actually. We'll give you Candles Are for Burning at R4Burning. That's the letter R, the number 4, Burning on Twitter, R for Burning. And then you can also even just follow the short film itself on Twitter at O-Film on Twitter and tell them that Cult Movie Show sent you. And we will be tweeting the link to where you can watch the short film throughout the week. You can watch it on Vimeo. You can look up their account, Candles Are Burning, and you can watch O- there.
Yes, and I do apologise if I confused the fuck out of that review, because...
I don't think so. No, it's really thought-provoking. You can go all kinds of places. Like, because I was also talking about Let the Right One In and Let Me In, and some people are going to be like, I haven't seen that movie. I don't know what the fuck you're talking about. So... It's a really thought-provoking film. There's a lot of ways you can go with it. It seems like at first glance you're like, oh, it's just a vampire story. No, it's so much more. It's really, the moral consequences of our actions. What are we willing to do for love? I mean, it's really well done and amazing because there's like almost no dialogue. Oh, and when you watch this mini movie, they do actually recommend listening with headphones if you can, to really get the full effect of the music, the atmospheric tone that they set with the sound effects and the music that they use in this, which I think the music's very fitting.
Yes. Yeah, most definitely. All right. Well, we will take a quick musical break and we will be back with movie number 2. And we are back, and that was, of course, the KLF with Justified and Ancient. And, how do you describe that song? I mean, it's like you take a...
my God, you took us back.
I mean, yeah, definitely.
It's the retro hour with Warren.
I mean, what is it there? An 80s or 90s.
I have no idea what to call them.
I mean, they're sort of like, they're half rock, they're half house. There's a bit of hip hop in there, and then they go and do a duet with Tammy Wynette. I mean, you know, it's like, I thought they were great, actually. I thought they were great. They were a bit fucked in the head, but I thought they were great. There was the famous story of them going to Scotland and taking £1 million sterling and burning it to prove their connection with the people or something or other.
I remember that. I remember hearing that and being like, what? Like, okay, you can, if you don't want the money, I'll take it. Fuck the connection with people.
I mean, how about taking the money and giving it to the poor? You know, right. I mean, burning
Donate it to a charity.
You know, you got to be
people.
kind of nuts, really. Yeah. And the other thing too, technically it's a crime, because for a private citizen to actually destroy the image of the reigning monarch, Queen Elizabeth II, is a crime. It's actually against the law to burn money in Britain, to destroy money. So,
crazy.
Yeah, anyway. The KLF. Oh, dearie me. Anyway, so we're talking about our second film, and we are going back to 1951, and with a reasonably famous film for its time anyway, and that is When Worlds Collide, which was taken from a 1932 book, basically called When Worlds Collide. So that's pretty straightforward. Now, it's although there was a sequel to the book apparently called After Worlds Collide, but we can get into that in just a moment. Now, what is our movie about? Well, it starts off with a pilot, a courier, sort of professional courier who does international couriering. So basically will take things, you know, from one part of the world and deliver them to another part of the world. And we start off with an observatory in South Africa. And he is hired by these scientists to collect a whole heap of photographs and technical data, and to get it back to New York. And of course, there's all secrets, there's all hush-hush. He's not told what it's about. And anyway, he takes it back to New York, where they mistakenly think that he knows what the information is he carries. And this is where they start to then tell the secret that they have learnt, and we learn it through our main character. Now, what they have found out is that the Earth is going to end. There is a rogue solar system. I don't quite know how this works. I've never heard of a rogue solar system before. But anyway, there is a rogue solar system, and it is on a direct collision course with Earth. And what is going to happen is that its star... Now, I'll try to remember what it's called. Its star is called...
Zyra?
No. The star is called Belus, and the planet that revolves around it is called Zyra. Now, what they believe is that because the Earth is going to collide with Belus and be destroyed, engulfed by this giant sun, but they believe that there is a way to build spaceships and to escape the Earth and to go to the planet Zara, even though they have no idea whether they can survive on Zara, but they still think it's worth the punt to actually go. And so our movie then follows the path of them building the spaceship, trying to collect money and so forth to do it. And then, of course, it will end up with the eventual destruction of the Earth and the escape of our heroes in their spaceship to try to colonize the new planet of Zyra. So, what did you think of this, Velvet?
Oh, wow. Okay, so, you know what? What could be a silly movie? Like, obviously, the science of, space travel, finding random planets, hoping we can survive on. Okay, obviously, all that information and theory in this is totally wrong and inaccurate. But what could be considered a silly little movie is really played completely straight. And I have to admit, this is one of those genres. End of the world disaster films really disturb me.
Yeah.
They really do. I don't know. I guess that's kind of like, for me, space is fucking scary anyways. And then the whole concept of how awful people are when it comes down to, kill or be killed. And they're really narrowing it down in this movie that basically out of the whole planet, they're like, oh, we can only take 44 people. And I'm like, nothing good's going to come out of that situation. Getting to that 44, people start turning on each other, start just stabbing each other, beating each other up. I mean, okay, and this movie's not graphic like that because it's from 1951, but that already makes my brain just fucking reel, just go crazy. So, like, I'm already on edge when they start talking about that kind of stuff.
Yes.
And especially because this movie's not nearly as silly or hokey as it could be. They play it straight and they build on that tension. And obviously, I think they kind of focus on some strange things. Like, they really try to make a love story out of this and focusing on the relationships. But at the same time, it's like, well, it's the end of the world. I guess that's what you would focus on, is the things that are most important to you and who you love. And I like it. I like the movie. It's a lot deeper than I thought it was going to be. I thought it was just going to be, oh God, it's from the 50s and it's sci-fi. So I just thought it was just going to be, goofy little, planets on strings and, fireworks for stars. And but I actually really enjoyed this, and I was surprised at how far they took it with people actually turning on each other and self-sacrifice and double-crossing and murder. And it was like, it's a little gem. I'm glad we got to watch this one.
Oh, look, it definitely is. I mean, I think that the other thing, too, is there's something very poignant about this movie today, because when the scientists discovered that the world is going to come to an end, but they do, and they can't stop that, but what they do have is a solution to save humanity, to save the human race. And guess what? The politicians don't believe them. Right? Does that sound familiar to what's going on? I mean, okay, we're not talking about the end of the world, but we are talking about substantial changes to the climate of the world. And guess what? Half the politicians do not want to listen. No, do not want to listen, even though 99.9% of scientists say it's happening. And I just found it really poignant that in 1951, they're telling exactly the same story. It's I just thought that was really, really interesting. The other thing too, I'll tell you a funny story. The first time I ever saw this was like a midday movie, like on Sunday afternoon when I was actually a child. And the main star of this movie, a gentleman called Richard Durr, who plays our, pilot, David Randall, the man's man sort of thing. And but he's really interestingly cast because when you actually look at him, he strikes an incredible resemblance to a comedian of the same time called Danny Kaye. Now, I don't know if you picked it up. And the very first time I saw this, I thought it was Danny Kaye. I actually thought this was Danny Kaye doing a drama rather than a comedy. And it wasn't until I was a teenager I found out, that wasn't Danny Kaye. That was somebody else.
That does happen, where it's just like, oh, mistaken identity.
Yeah. Yes.
When we first start watching this movie, I really did think it was just going to be a goofy 1950s sci-fi that would be fun to make fun of, because it does have a very dramatic title screen, just like When Worlds Collide. And it has really, just like, it takes up the entire screen, and really dramatic music, and then it begins with a Bible quote, and I'm like, about God destroying the earth, and I'm like, oh God, this movie's already losing me. I'm like, I don't know if I can handle this kind of stuff. But then all of a sudden it jumps to an observatory in South Africa, and I'm kind of like, why is that really strange to me all of a sudden? And I was like, okay, here comes the hokiness. But no, it starts off kind of goofy, over dramatic, but then it gets pretty serious when they're like, hey, basically a better done version of Deep Impact.
Yes, it is.
And they did this in the 50s without any of the special effects that we have today. They made a better movie about what would happen if the world was going to get hit by another planet or meteor or whatever. What if something's going to collide with our planet that's going to knock out civilization? What are we going to do? And 1951's When Worlds Collide did it way better than our movie from the 90s, A Deep Impact.
Oh, look.
with none of the special effects.
I couldn't agree more. Weren't there that year, there were 2 end-of-the-world comet movies?
Yeah, what was the other one? Armageddon with Bruce Willis. And Ben Affleck.
Oh, my God, was that bad. Oh, yes, God. That was so bad. I mean, at least Deep Impact was believable to a degree, but Deep Impact was just so... I mean, the whole idea of Deep Impact, that it's easier to train oil miners to become astronauts than it is to teach astronauts how to use drilling equipment. Do you know what I mean? It's like, it's just, I mean, and that film clip with, because what was the girl who was in that, the daughter of the singer?
Oh yeah, from Aerosmith. Liv Tyler. There we go.
And in the film clip, she's there, meant to be there, looking at Ben Affleck with love. Is he coming back? She's looking at the screen. Oh, I love you. But in the film clip, they replace Ben Affleck with her father. So it's so fucking sick. I know. It's so sick. It's just, I don't think they realised what they were doing.
Fuck you, Hollywood.
Yes. Oh, God, But I agree. This film does it better. It really does. The other thing, too, is that I really felt for our main couple, which is, Joyce Henron and David Randall. Like they're... but in a sense, though, he does come in and split up a relationship. I mean, you have, she's basically betrothed, if you like, to another man, and he does come in and break up the relationship, and she falls for him. But then again, that's real life. That happens all the time.
Right, exactly.
And it's not like...
I don't think he really tried that hard. I mean, he just kind of like... let her know that he was interested, and then all of a sudden she was like, you know what, I am too. Like, he wasn't like, being devious about it. He was just kind of like, I think you're pretty, I like to get to know you. And she was like, yeah, I'm into that.
And the other thing too is that through most of the movie, about 80% of the movie, he's actually not prepared to break up the relationship. Like, he actually wants them to stay together, and he's going to sacrifice himself and not go on the mission. He's going to stay on Earth, and they're going to go. But of course, he really does want to go because he really is in love with her, but he's prepared to self-sacrifice himself. And the interesting thing about this is there's so many characters in this movie that make self-sacrifice. It's like they're really trying to show that although there are evil people, because we do have some evil bastards in this movie, but even though they exist, the majority of humanity is good. It's like we look about it. Her father self-sacrifices. Her ex-boyfriend self-sacrifices. Our main star is prepared to self-sacrifice.
Right.
It's like they're all good, humane humans. But we do have a real evil baddie in him, and my God, is he evil, Velvet?
Oh, the wheelchair millionaire.
Yes.
I love him. He is the best villain ever. He is ruthless. No fucks given. He will let the entire world burn if that means he could live one more day. Like, he is such an asshole.
I know.
So entertaining. So entertaining to watch. The wheelchair millionaire is what I call him. And he's rich as fuck, which makes him extremely dangerous because he's really like, he can bankroll pretty much the entire like spaceship. He's like, whatever you guys need, I can give you money, but I want a seat on the ship. And they're like, okay, they're just like, all right, you get a seat on the ship. And then he tries to take it a step further. He tries to be like, well, I'm also going to pick who else gets to be on the ship. And they're like, no, you can give us money and you can get a seat on the ship or no deal. And so finally he's like, okay. But yeah, he's just a dick.
Yes.
He's a terrible,
he is.
Mean antagonist.
And it won't go well for him. We can
does not
say
go
that.
well for him.
It does not go. It does not go well for him. At all. But there is another thing too. We were talking about special effects and and so forth. But but this movie did in fact win an Oscar. I'm trying to just remember. Oh yes, in 1951 it actually did win Best Special Effects.
Oh, wow.
By the Academy.
Wow.
So, and it was also nominated for the Best Cinematography in Colour. Because remember, in 1951, huge amounts of movies are still being made in black and white. So
right.
There were actually, they broke the classifications between colour and between black and white for cinematography. Because obviously it's a very different art, black and white and colour cinematography. But it would actually win a special, an Academy Award for special effects. However, it has been pointed out, did it really deserve it? Because the special effects throughout this entire movie are brilliant, I think, for 1951.
Right.
Until it gets to our closing scene. And
where it's just a picture?
It is just a painting.
Yes, yeah, that's that kind of, it doesn't ruin the movie, but it definitely brings it down a notch. You're all of a sudden just like, this movie miraculously, considering the circumstances, has a happy ending, but then all of a sudden you're kind of like, wait, that's a painting, and they're walking towards the painting, but which is,
yeah.
One thing I thought was interesting about this film is that they are talking about rescuing mankind via space travel. And this movie is in 1951. Obviously, like you said, the book was from a book in the 30s. This was before man had actually left the planet on any type of spacecraft. This was before we had any type of space program or space travel. So I thought that was interesting that they'd actually made this kind of movie before we had proven that, yes, humans can survive in space to a degree. We need a lot of equipment and preparation and all kinds of shit to make it happen. But yes, it can be done. And I don't know if we're going to find a planet ever that we can inhabit.
Well, at the moment, if we were going to move to another planet, the only way we could do it at the moment is to terraform. We would have to actually terraform.
Right.
It's the only way to do it. I mean, could you terraform Mars? Well, there's scientists who believe you can. But there are. Yeah, I mean, look, it's we're so far away from all of that at the moment.
Right.
Although, but one of the questions is, should we be? I mean, we spend so much money on bullshit, in this world politically, when we should be spending it on this stuff. I mean, you think about how much. The other thing, it just annoys me sometimes when we say, "Oh, we can't afford to go back to the moon," right? We can't afford to go back to the moon, but we need a 25th aircraft carrier. Well, no, I mean, seriously, how many fucking aircraft carriers do you need, I mean, couldn't we spend this to get back to the moon? I mean,
exactly.
it's just, to me, it's all just, it's like, our imagination for exploration seems to now be through movies rather than real life.
Right.
And it's such a shame. You know, what's happened to us as a species where humans are natural explorers. You know, there was that whole idea going back into prehistory of like, what's over the next hill? What's beyond the next valley? And we would explore and we would find out. Now we just sit back and make movies about it.
And these type of movies actually every once in a while kind of make me go, should we have a backup plan? I mean, should we be actually looking for planets that we could possibly inhabit in the case that, for whatever reason, we do actually want to evacuate this planet? If that was to ever be a case for whatever reason, whether asteroids are coming or a rogue, what was that, a rogue solar system spins out of control?
That was a bit weird.
I was like, but should we have a backup plan? Should we have an alternate space in space that we could possibly inhabit? I mean, is that something we should really be looking into as, you know, natural-born explorers?
Well,
I don't know.
The problem is at the moment it's not feasible because the problem is the closest star is, 21 light years away.
Exactly.
And I don't believe the Alpha Centauri system has what we believe any planets of what they call in the, you know, like the livable zone, that perfect zone from a star. There are other planets that we have discovered that we believe possibly could, and we're also now, because of course via telescope, I'm not talking about watching it, I'm talking about radio telescopes, we're actually able to work out the chemical compositions of the atmospheres, which is a fascinating thing within itself. There might be other planets out there that we could go to. The problem is we don't have the technology to move that.
And this movie totally bypasses that, where they're talking about how fast they're going to be able to fly, and their main concern is having enough fuel to make this mission so that they'll make it in the amount of time. They're going to have this period where everybody basically blacks out, like falls asleep.
Yes.
And they're going to stay asleep basically for the duration of, and we're not talking about suspended animation, people. They even call it the blackout. For whatever reason, people are going to go so high into the atmosphere that they pass out, but they're going to be okay. They're just going to stay passed out until they get near the inhabitable planet, and then they're going to all wake up again. So very strange science going on in this movie. But their main concern is not survival, but actually landing, because they're like, are we going to have enough fuel? And in the movie, like right down to the very last, drop of fuel, they have to time it perfectly to land on this planet.
Well, if you think about it, that is, to a degree, kind of how the moon landings worked. Well, forget the blackout bit of it, right? Okay, but the idea is that you've got all the fuel to breach the atmosphere. You then actually go into orbit around the Earth and build up enough speed where you basically are just in free flight. Okay, there's no engines being used. You're only using engines occasionally to adjust your course, and then you're using your fuel to land. So, in a sense, they got that right.
Right.
That little bit they did actually get right, that is how we travel in space. Even the space shuttle, before the program was ended, the fuel was used to get up, and then the fuel was used to land. The fuel wasn't used when they were actually in space. So they were sort of right with that. But
right on.
But what did you think of the spaceship itself?
Yeah, that was pretty cool looking, wasn't it? It had that very classic 50s sci-fi, what you picture a spaceship to look like in the 50s.
Yes.
It's very, very silver, very sleek, very pointed.
Yes.
It looked very cool. I did like that, actually. Also, the way they were launching it was interesting. It kind of reminded me of a roller coaster. They were going to kind of just push it down the hill and let it get momentum with the boosters and shoot up into space.
Well, that's right. It was a really interesting concept, which was you don't launch vertically like a rocket. You actually launch going downhill. So you release the rocket, which then starts its own momentum going downhill, and then when it reaches its maximum velocity, that's at the point where the ramp starts to go up, and then you hit the engines. So the idea is they've already built up several hundred kilometers or whatever it is of velocity before they even kit the rocket engines in. So it was actually a kind of really interesting concept, especially for 1951. It's like somebody had to think of that.
Right, and we had not been to space yet, people. So, I mean, this was the theory that they came up with for this film for how it's viable for them to launch, take off.
Well, yes, 1951, the Soviets had still not even put the first satellite into space. Right. So we're not even talking about people. The first satellite had still not been launched. I don't think they launched the first satellite until, was it 1956? Something, I think. So someone can look it up. That sounds
about right.
Sputnik, I mean, it's Sputnik. Anyone can go and look it up.
Right.
And then, of course, the Soviets would put up the first dog, which I think was it Mika? Mika the dog, I think. And the first astronaut, Yuri Gagarin, maybe that was the late 50s. I can't remember all the dates, but I don't think Sputnik had even been put up by 1951. But I stand to be corrected, guys, if there are, really science-minded people out there.
Yeah, I'm not the best with dates unless I have it written down in front of me, so I'll take your word for it.
But it's still, and if you also consider it's taken from a book from 1932, that's pretty amazing. That's pretty amazing.
Yes, it is. It is. This movie had really strong biblical overtones for a sci-fi film.
Oh, yeah.
Like I said, right at the beginning, it starts out with Bible quote, and then somebody even mentions, like a 20th century Noah's Ark is proposed, and they even show them like loading up 2 of every animal and onto this spaceship. So I mean, that was interesting.
But if you think about it, in much the same way as the original movie, when The Day the Earth Stood Still, which is using a science fiction genre to tell sort of kind of the story of Jesus Christ, where this movie, in a sense, is a science fiction take on Noah's Ark. And it is interesting that they do mention it because, let's face it, it is the same story. The Earth is going to end. Well, Noah's Ark story is the Earth's not going to end, but all life on Earth is going to end. And so then a chosen few will head off, on a ship, or in this case, a spaceship. It is the same story, in essence, being told from a more modern perspective.
And it is. And so, and also, I know we're not doing Bible study right now, but they talk about, the reigning 40 days, 40 nights, that kind of thing, or, around the Noah's Ark. I mean, before this planet actually hits the Earth, there's what is it? A star or something swings by and fucks up our gravitational pull, and the weather goes crazy. And you see cities wiped out, homes underwater, stranded survivors, and I'm like, that's kind of like the 40-day flood from the Bible.
That's right.
Something comes along and just fucks everybody up, and I'm just like, wow, it's an interesting combination of almost like Christian religion and sci-fi. I mean, really, but really well done because they don't shove it down your throat, even though the symbology is and the themes are very obvious. I don't feel like you're totally being preached to. Because, I mean, it's not like when they land, they do actually land on the planet, people. When they land on the planet, they're not like, oh, thank God, and let's take a moment of prayer. I mean, it's not a Christian film.
No,
it's not a Christian film, thank God.
I love that it's not a Christian film, thank God.
Yes.
But it's...
So that way everybody can enjoy this. You don't have to feel singled out or excluded if you're not Christian.
The same as, The Day the Earth Stood Still. It's not. It might be retelling a story in a modern way, right? But
Right.
the idea, the story, I mean, the whole idea is that, see, especially for me, right? It works really well for me because, obviously I'm not a Christian, okay? So I don't believe in, I don't believe in Noah. I don't even believe Jesus was a real person, but that's just my belief, right?
Right.
So I don't want to stop anybody else from believing what they do. But the interesting thing is that to me, they're just ancient stories. Right, that's all they're just ancient stories trying to explain morals in a way that people can understand. And in a way, movie making today is no different. It's just telling stories. It's a form of artistic storytelling. So
absolutely.
So
yes.
The idea, I mean, for instance, the story of Noah and the Ark, it predates Christians. Obviously, it predates the Jews. I mean, the story can be found going back to the Babylonians. In fact, it's kind of believed that's probably where the story originated from.
Right.
When the Torah was actually written in Babylon in about. Oh God! There's my history now. It was written around.
You're rocking some people's worlds right now. They're just hearing this for the first time, and they're going to be completely shocked.
Well, everybody knows. It's no great secret that the Old Testament is certain segments of the Torah, and the Torah was basically written in ancient Babylon during Exodus. Not so during Exodus. Sorry, during the. What was it called? When the Babylonians invaded Israel and took I'm not going to go down ancient history, but the idea was that, for instance, the Jews didn't have written language until they were invaded by the Babylonians. So the whole idea was they had storytelling. It was told from like lip to lip. It was told, somebody would tell the story. It wasn't actually written down. Now, it's not actually until the Babylonians come along that we've actually got written language. And then this stuff starts. And so what happens is that people then start to record it. And so it then becomes everybody's history, not just the history of one group. We're not talking about the movie. I shouldn't be talking about all of this stuff. Sorry.
Okay,
I shouldn't be. Yeah.
No problem. I can bring it back to the movie for you.
Yeah.
So some of the things, like when they're doing the whole preparation, as you mentioned, they speak to the politicians. The politicians think they're a bunch of crackpots. They're like, you guys are out of your fucking mind. These calculations can't be right. There's no way that we're going to get hit by some random shit in space. And so they hit up the rich people, which, you get some older rich men who agree to fund the salvation mission. And that's when they also introduce our antagonist, basically our villain, the wheelchair millionaire is what I like to call him. And people, if you're asking why I keep calling him the wheelchair millionaire, it's because he is wheelchair bound.
Yes.
So
that's right.
I'm not discriminating against his disability. It's just it sounds cool. I mean, if I were a villain, I want to be a wheelchair millionaire, because how cool is that? Anyways, just yeah. But so small selection of educational materials that they're taking, which was interesting too, because they're restricted by weight. That's one of the reasons they're only taking 44 people. They're taking as many people as they can, but they don't just want to take people. They're taking a limited amount of educational materials, mathematics, history of the world as it was on Earth, and human anatomy, like all these educational materials. And then, of course, the animals. I mean, they're taking dogs, they're taking cats, they're taking cows, they're taking, all the animals that we use in agriculture to produce food on this new world. But the whole preparation is when I start getting a little nervous when I'm watching this movie, because, people now know they're literally going to die, except for like 44 people. Like the entire fucking planet knows they're going to die. And that would definitely shift your priorities. Money's not going to be important anymore. Just so much shit, that is bringing you down your daily life isn't going to fucking matter anymore. You're not going to worry about credit card debt. You're not going to worry about showing up for traffic court.
Yes.
There's just all this stuff, and it makes my brain reel. And it made me think of that movie that you and I reviewed, Seeking a Friend for the End of the World.
End of the World, yeah.
Exactly, which was the same situation that there were people, but in that movie, it was the end all be all. Something was going to hit the planet and there was nothing people could do. And just all people could do was live their life until the world, got bashed in. And I was just like, oh my God. And so it gets to the point where now, they're instilling martial law. Like what is, left? People are going crazy. So they've instilled martial law, but then they were talking about evacuation passes. And I'm like, oh my God, only like 40 something people are going to have these evacuation passes. And, again, I've joked about lax gun laws in the United States because if we didn't have them, so many movies wouldn't exist. What happens? The wheelchair millionaire loads up the ship with guns and rifles because he knows that people are going to start going fucking crazy trying to get on the ship, and they want to be able to blow their asses away so they can make a clean getaway. Of course, that's what he wants. Nobody else wants this, but what happens? Some people get their hands on those weapons. And like I said, these kind of movies just put me on edge. Cause just seeing how ugly and scary humanity gets when they're in a desperate situation that they cannot control. But let me bring it back to something funny. This is funny to me. So there's when they're preparing, there's constantly this voice over the intercom that's always saying, you're behind schedule. You're behind schedule. We're 3 days behind schedule. You're behind schedule. And I'm like, is that someone's job?
I know.
Everyone, they're behind schedule all day long. I mean, like, is that what they literally do? Just sit at a microphone all day long for weeks saying, you're behind schedule. Hurry up, faster, everybody. We're 1 day behind schedule. We're 2 hours behind schedule. I'm like, is that really somebody's job?
Well, it's like, I mean, it's obviously why, it's obvious why they do it. They do it to tell us, the audience, that they're running against time. But the whole idea of this voice coming over the PA system all the time, sort of going, Zara coming in 7 days. We're 1 day behind schedule. Move it, people. Move it. Move it. It's like, it would drive you nuts. I mean,
oh God,
this guy on the speaker must have been the most unpopular person in the camp. It's like, just shut up already. Just shut up. But it is interesting, though. I did find, that idea where, they do find the guns and they try to take over the spaceship. But how do they stop them? They don't stop them with guns. They stop them with the fence which is around the spaceship. I mean, it's like, it's pretty easy, people. Just lock the gate. They can't get in. Even if they've got guns, they can't get in. There's a gate.
Back to the wheelchair millionaire. So he had a personal assistant, Varys. I have to admit, I was very surprised that Varys had not been guaranteed a seat on the ship. I was like, wow, that's kind of fucked up. He's this wheelchair millionaire's personal assistant, pushing him around, attending to his every beck and call. And yeah, he was not going to get a ride on the ship. I was like, damn. That's pretty fucked up.
I think, though, the whole idea is that his sort of character, he's so self-obsessed. I mean, he'll, like you said before, he'd be prepared to kill everyone on the planet if he got 1 extra hour of life. Like he doesn't, so he wouldn't care about this personal assistant, it's
evidently
like,
not.
No,
he shot his ass.
Yes, that's right. So no, and the other thing too, it does show is that it just reinforces what contempt he has for anyone other than himself. That, that he will do anything to keep his own power, money, and life. He's not interested in anyone. He will put anyone under the bus to keep it about him. So, it's not a very nice person. And I think the fact of his personal assistant, when we have that scene with him, it just goes to show, and it tells the audience, just reinforces how much of an evil bastard he is.
Yes, absolutely.
Absolutely. He'll put anyone under the bus for his own survival.
Yes, he will. This movie has some great quotes that I just have to talk about. Like this one, I actually absolutely love. There's some great self-sacrifice by one of the main characters, and he says, "The new world is for the young." not for the old, And I thought that was great that, basically he's kind of saying, I've lived my life. I'm an old man, let's give it to the young people, the next generation. I love that. But then my next favorite quote is when they land on the planet. Yes, people, they actually make it to the planet and they land. Spoiler, hey, the movie's from 1950 fucking one. Yeah. And they land on the planet and they're like, wait, we got to change, we got to check the atmosphere. But somebody just goes, we're on Zyra. Let's get out.
I know.
Like, yeah, we're on Zyra. Let's get out. But I have to admit, when we reviewed Raw, you were visibly disturbed by that film.
Yeah.
These end-of-the-world movies literally make my stomach turn. They fill me with anxiety and sadness, and it's really funny how we're all affected differently by film, and especially this film, because this is really relatively tame compared to the subject matter of other films that cover this type of topic. But even this one, I'm like, oh, God, I'm so on edge. And literally my stomach was turning toward the end when they're like trying to take off. And I'm like, even though I kind of know they're going to make it, I'm like, I don't know. It just makes me so. It's one of those topics like space travel and end of the world disasters that are wiping out the entire population. Oh, they really disturbed me. And so I just wanted to share that with you to let you know that.
We'll have to cut back on them a little bit, I think. But the one thing is that I do understand where you're coming from. I mean, for instance, with this particular movie, I never felt like that, and I think a lot of it is because it's from 1951. You don't actually see mass carnage.
For me, it's obviously more mental than what the movie's actually showing. Exactly. The movie's not going to make anybody else upset. This is just my personal thing. Absolutely.
But it's still a very valid point, though, Velvet. It's not something to be taken lightly. It's still very valid. It's like you said with Raw. A lot of people will watch Raw and not be worried about the material in it at all. But then you get someone like me who is physically, actually, and emotionally quite shocked by it, right? So the thing is that that's down to the individual. There's not a right or a wrong. It's down to the individual. But I do agree with you when it comes to end of the world movies. Especially, I'm not talking about the older ones. They don't. But I will tell you, the modern ones do affect me in the same way that they affect you. When I saw the movie, what was it? With The Rock, because I love The Rock. But San Andreas. Where the west coast of the United States.
And I did not watch that one.
No, because one of the things that troubled me about that is that how graphic the mass death of thousands upon thousands of people is.
That disturbs me too. And
I do find that a little bit disturbing, and I'm always interested how people can watch that and not be moved by it. Or are the filmmakers trying to make you moved by it? I mean, I don't know. Because now when we see End of the World, it is incredibly graphic with, because, when we see bridges being washed away and that there's 5,000 people on the bridge, it's like, I have to admit, that does emotionally get to me as well.
Exactly. Because there's a movie that's out right now and it's getting horrendous reviews. Evidently, it's an absolutely horrible movie. But when I saw the preview in the theater and I saw the preview a couple more times in the theater, I couldn't watch it. It just visibly disturbed me. And it's called Geostorm. And it's basically about somebody using weather control to commit terrorist acts against the planet, which obviously that's very far-fetched and it's just a movie. People have to remind me it's just a movie. Just the fucking visuals in the trailer were too much for me to handle. They really upset me. Like when they show like a plane just like dropping out of the fucking sky and landing on top of buildings, and that really bothers me. I was like, wow, I'm getting soft in my old age here. I'm like, I can't watch this kind of stuff. I can't see that kind of just mass destruction. Just it's getting too realistic looking. I'm like, I can't handle it. But thank goodness it's an awful movie, and it's not like going to be traumatizing to other people. I think.
Well, I have often wondered sometimes is that did an event like 9/11, for argument's sake, change the way that a lot of people feel about these movies.
Like, I think so. Yeah, I think so.
Because it's like before that, you'd have mass destruction and all the rest of it, but it was always fantasy. And then along would come, and then now that's not necessarily 100% true, but think about how many cities have gone through horrific earthquakes and, and so forth. But the thing is that there was something about, because 9/11 shouldn't have, like, in other words, you can't control an earthquake. An earthquake is just going to happen. But 9/11 was people doing this to other people. So
exactly.
And so it's changed us so much because we now sort of, we feel so less safe now. And do sometimes disaster movies now for so many people, are they just too much? Because we actually now think in our heads, shit, this really could happen. Where maybe before 9/11 it was sort of like just fantasy. I don't know. No,
I think you make a valid point there, but I think I need some clarification on this in the movie. Okay, there's little boy finds a dog. I'm pretty fucking sure they showed that dog had a wang. Was that not a boy dog? Didn't they even say, didn't even the doctor say, oh, it's a boy dog? Then all of a sudden at the end of the movie, the dog gave birth to puppies. And I'm like, wait, didn't I see doggy wiener? Like, wasn't that a boy dog? How did it become a grown-up puppies all of a sudden?
Either that was, maybe it was an hermaphrodite or something, but I don't remember.
You know what? Space travel makes you go through a sex change, I guess. And it instantly impregnates you. So, you know what? Those were actually not puppies. Those were little four-legged xenomorphs. Those were little furry xenomorphs. That's what must have happened. They got impregnated during the journey, and then, like, they think they're puppies, but they're really all just carrying little xenomorphs inside of each puppy.
That's maybe if they ever were going to make a sequel, the xenomorph dog would take over.
Now, so the question is it going to have the head of a dog and the body of a xenomorph, or the body of a dog and the head of a xenomorph?
Just imagine in the seat where you'd have all these people on the new planet having dogs coming out of their chest cavities.
Anybody listening, please make that happen. Please recreate the chest bursting scene and have a puppy come out. Tweet us after you do it. We want to see this.
But here's the other thing too, is that the way they get around trying to choose people and so people don't turn on each other too early is they draw lots. Okay, so everyone draws lots.
A lottery now, system.
But here's the interesting thing about it, right? They divide it equally between men and women, but it works on the premise that they're all going to pair off, right? Now, what guarantee is there? Do you know what I mean? Basically, you're going to say to these people, maybe you can't stand the person we've paired you with, but you now have to go and have a family with them.
Yuck.
It's
yuck. And there have been theories about that. If it ever comes to a point where, for whatever reason, there's mass devastation and the population's at an all-time low, that moral standards are going to change in regards to reproduction. And one theory was there's basically just going to be the group of ladies, kind of like the handmaiden in that whole handmaiden world, where that's what they do. Their profession is to get pregnant by anybody and everybody. So they are just always going to be pregnant and having babies. Doesn't matter with whom. Doesn't matter if they have a boyfriend or a husband. That's what they're going to be doing. And I'm like, ooh. So that's what's going to happen to this. So they better.
The other thing too is you think about the gene pool now. Okay, so basically you've now got basically roughly 20 couples having, and they're going to have to interbreed. The gene pool is going to be tiny, right? Absolutely tiny.
Oh no!
Which is
Zyra is going to become the Hills Have Eyes.
Basically, yes.
Inbred cannibalistic space travelers.
And not just that. You think about when they take the cows. So they take one cow and one bull. All right. The entire species of cows is going to come down to one single pair. The inbreeding is going to be you think about it, right? It's just...
Oh, goodness gracious. Oh, I didn't even think that
The
far.
gene, yeah, the animals you're down to a single pair, and the humans you're down to 20 pairs. That's it, the entire gene
And that's
pool.
only if they pair up.
Yeah.
Oh. It's going to be two women who are having all the babies, and it's just like, that's really all it's going to be.
Yeah.
It's going to be two women who agree to have all the babies. And this
kid that they take, right, there's nobody his age. Right, they're going to start having children within the first 5 minutes that they land. Otherwise, there's going to be nobody his age whatsoever.
Oh, my goodness gracious.
You know?
Oh, man. I just hope the world never gets hit by a rogue solar system so that people never have to worry about the consequences of inbreeding.
Yes. Oh, dear. Oh, dear. All right, well, maybe we should move on. How are we going to rate...
Oh man, no, I really did enjoy this movie. I was surprised how much it affected me. I thought it was just going to be a goofy 50s sci-fi, but as you can see, it brings up a lot of social implications, moral implications, questions about ethics, just inbreeding. Just you could go on for hours about this movie when you really break it down. Worth a watch. Even if you're like me and you're really squeamish about space travel and end-of-world scenarios, this is really such a gem. Out of the 5 possible Eric Roberts, I'm going to go ahead and give this 3.5 just because of the dubious science. But no, I did enjoy this. 3.5.
Yeah, look, I enjoyed it as well. As I said before, I'm not really into these, Earth is destroyed, millions of people being killed and all that sort of stuff. I'm not really into them. But this is different. I think this is from 1951. It's got a certain, harmlessness to it in some degrees.
Right, yeah.
So look, I'm going to give it, I'm going to give it the same, 3.5. It's not perfect. It's spoiled by a few things, especially that ending. With that painting, I just think that was...
I thought you were going to say with the boy dog all of a sudden having puppies.
Well, no,
no, the painting fucks it up.
Yeah, that was. I mean, for a movie where the special effects were really so good at this point, that was a real letdown. I thought, my God, is that where you were going to leave it? So, but no, 3.5. I'll give it 3.5 Erics.
Oh, and also really quick, back to the painting that they show that everybody walks toward. It looks like there's like a artificial structure or a man-made structure, and I'm kind of like, wait, are they trying to say that there's already some kind of form of life on this planet? But nobody seems to notice it. Nobody's like, hey, what's that in the distance? They're just like, oh, look at the sunset, puppies! And I'm like, fuck you, movie. Wait, you just brought up another question and you didn't address it.
Well, you think about this planet, okay, when they land on it, it has trees, it has grass, it has all this sort of stuff, okay?
It has landscaping.
Yeah. So the whole idea, if you've got to the stage of carbon-based life where you've got trees, actual trees, and the other thing to remember too, a tree... a tree okay, they're very old, but if you think about it, trees themselves are only about, 150 million years old? Life goes back a lot longer than that, okay? Trees are actually a pretty modern concept of life. Because if you actually think about what it takes to create the trunk of a tree, that's real serious biology. So if it's got trees... the chances are it's actually got other life as well.
Right.
So you just have to you have to think about that, which when you say you thought you saw a structure, maybe that was intentional. The idea that there is actually life there, because it may not be intelligent life, but I'll tell you what, if you've got trees, you're going to have some other form of animal life. It's going to have to be there, So, that's why the sequel, which I've never read, I don't know where it goes. Maybe they do find life on this planet.
Interesting.
That's really interesting within itself. In fact, a sequel to this would have been fascinating. I actually
Yeah.
think that a sequel would have
Yeah.
been more fascinating than this actual movie, to be honest. There would have been absolutely really interesting to see where they could have gone with that. No, it's a really good point, actually. It's a really, really good point.
But definitely worth checking out. So it was a fun one.
Yeah, most definitely. Most definitely. All right, we'll take a quick break and we'll be back with our final movie. Now, that was West End Girls from Sweden with their cover of Domino Dancing. Yes, of course, a Pet Shop Boys song. covered by a band called West End Girls. Well, surprise, surprise. Surprise, surprise. They were two girls from Sweden. Well, three actually, because one left and another one joined. And all they basically do is covers of the Pet Shop Boys. And
wow.
They've actually got the Pet Shop Boys full approval. Apparently, the Pet Shop Boys love them. They thought they were great. Absolutely brilliant. Not only that, when they actually made a documentary about the history of the Pet Shop Boys, talking about their origins and all their songs and everything like that, they actually featured these two girls in their documentary, which was kind of interesting. So there you go, the West End Girls. You can actually, they've only got one album, although they do have another number of other singles, and you can grab them off iTunes. Now, we're going back to 1967. Yes, to the swinging 60s of London. With a movie. We were talking about religious overtones before, Velvet. We're talking about religious overtones in a very British comic style. And we are talking about the movie Bedazzled. Yes, the original one, not the remake, from 2000. Now, it's a really interesting film. It is, of course, the telling, very loosely, I suppose, of Faust, isn't it, Velvet, in that sense?
Yeah, definitely. Very loosely.
Very loosely. Where a man basically sells his soul to the devil for a wish, in this case, 7 wishes. And it stars the comic duo who, of course, ran for many, many years, Peter Cook and Dudley Moore, although it does have a number of other quite big celebrities actually in the movie. Now, it was actually written by Peter Cook, and you can definitely tell, because this movie is so British. I cannot say just enough how British this movie is. And I do actually think it is incredibly funny. And if you've only seen the remake from 2000, you've got to give this one a try, because it is so different. Now, our story basically starts with one of our main characters, played by Dudley Moore, who is called Stanley Moon. Now, he's a short order cook, so basically a hamburger flipper, and he's fallen in love with one of the waitresses at the cafe that he works at, called Margaret. Now, he's so in love with her, but nobody really gives any time to Stanley Moon. He's just he's one of those people that people just ignore. He's meant to be in his 30s. He's never had a girlfriend. And anyway, he tries to commit suicide. He's so unhappy. And while his failed attempt at suicide, he will be introduced to a gentleman that we, of course, will know as the Devil. But, of course, he goes by a slightly different name, doesn't he, Velvet?
Oh, yes. George Spigot.
Spigot, yes.
Why not?
Why not?
As good as the other.
George Spigot. You can just, basically feel Peter Cook all over this. So, anyway, the Devil, or George, basically sells... comes up with a deal for him where he gets 7 wishes for his soul. So poor old Stanley Moon signs the contract and then starts his wishes. But of course, in true devil fashion, it will be basically blocked at every turn by the devil trying to find every loophole to make sure his wishes go wrong. And the interesting thing about it, too, is the devil will appear in every one of his wishes in some shape or form. Now, it's broken down, obviously, into the 7 wishes. And I suppose we'll talk a bit about the film in general, and then we can go through each sort of wish.
That sounds good.
But then what will happen, of course, is after, of course, his wishes never sort of go right. And in the end, he's trapped in a certain form that he's not very happy with for eternity. But he finds out that the devil, George Spigot, has also made a devil with God, that they've been having a soul collection competition, for the last, I don't know, however, eternity. And it was the first to get to, was it 1 billion souls? I think, was that right? Whoever got to 1 billion souls. So anyway, so the devil gets to his target, which means that he'll now be allowed back into heaven as an angel. Because, of course, the devil was, is meant to be a fallen angel. Now, so he, of course, will go back. And, of course, it won't quite work out the way the devil or George Spigot hoped it would work out either. So it's a really interesting film. And, my God, if you like British humour, especially that undergraduate humour, you will be laughing a lot. It's a very funny film. What did you think, Velvet?
This is very, very, very funny. I absolutely love Bedazzled, the 2000 version with Brendan Fraser, and I've never seen the original, and oh my gosh, I mean, they're both fun. Obviously, they both have different flavors. The Brendan Fraser one with Elizabeth Hurley has obviously got the Hollywood flavor, whereas this one, as you said before, has the British flavor. So I think they're both worth checking out, but this one, oh my god, if you've never seen Bedazzled from 1967, I mean, you got young Dudley Moore. He's so cute and pathetic and sad, and you just feel so sorry for the guy. You want all of his wishes to go right for him, and they never do. And then Peter Cook looks devilishly handsome, pun intended. Yeah, they really play up his eyebrows in this to make him look extra devilish. But no, I mean, they have great on-screen chemistry, and just some of the most absurd, funny situations. And I love the personification of the 7 deadly sins. You get to see sloth and lust and avarice or greed in human form, and it's it's very unexpected when you first meet the first sin, anger, and he is an angry guy.
Yes.
Which is really, really fun. One of the things that this is such a time capsule movie because it is so 1967 with the fashion, the hairstyles, the women's makeup. You have to kind of get over that curve of just like, oh, because some of the stuff looks absolutely atrocious.
Yeah.
By today's standards, but it was still a really fun movie.
Oh, I mean, and just some great classic lines. I mean, the way they play, Peter Cook plays the devil and wrote the devil. The whole idea is that when he meets George Spigot, and just some of the writing is so clever. But then George Spigot actually, sorry, not George Spigot, Dudley Moore, which is Stanley Moon. He wants proof. He wants scientific proof that George Spigot really is the devil. So he clicks his fingers and he takes him. They miraculously appear somewhere, and it's in the East End of London. And George Spigot just looks around and goes, "Is this hell?" And the devil says, "Oh no, it's just my London headquarters."
It does look awful. It's like all dilapidated and run down and polluted and gray and dirty. And it could be a version of hell on Earth.
Well, you still remember there was large chunks of London, even by 1967, that hadn't still been fully rebuilt from the Second World War. There were still collapsed buildings and stuff in 1967. It was a pretty dark place. Sort of unless you were wealthy, Britain could still be a bit of a dark place. And so they do play on that, obviously, quite a bit. But but what we'll also get throughout this movie is that whenever he gets a wish and goes off to live this new life, the way he has to get out of it is to blow a raspberry, which is and the magical words that takes him to this place is Julie Andrews.
Okay, why is that the magic word? Why is Julie Andrews the main star from The Sound of Music and Mary Poppins? Why is Julie Andrews the magic word? Do you know?
Well, I think it's just that Julie Andrews was such a British icon and so innocent and and all the rest of it. That's because he does try saying somebody else's name, so it doesn't work. So he has to go back to saying Julie Andrews all the time. And the other thing, too, is that in between each wish, what we'll see is he'll reappear with the devil in some ludicrous situation where the devil is up to mischief, basically just causing mischief in his in the way that he does. And some of the dialogue between the two of them is just brilliant, I thought, Velvet. It's just...
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
They have great chemistry. I just want to expound very slightly on the blow a raspberry. There's always going to be at least one person who doesn't know what the hell we're talking about when they say that Stanley Moon, whenever the wish isn't going right and he wants to end the wish and make a next wish, he has to blow a raspberry. There's at least one person listening going, what do you mean blow a raspberry?
Oh, okay,
That's when I'll do it.
Okay.
That is when you take your tongue and you put it between your lips and you blow air. You make that little fart sound.
That's right.
And it's actually really funny because every time he wants to end a wish, and there's one wish, I won't give it away, but there's one wish right when the wish begins, he tries to blow a raspberry, and it just made me laugh. Like right when the wish started, he's like, you're like, dang, like he's ready to leave that wish already. He just made it, and he wants it over with.
Well, should we actually start talking about his wishes?
Actually, hold on before we go into that. I want to say that this film has great dark comedy. This, again, kind of like Rock and Roll High School, I said, you can't really make them like this anymore. This film has a comedic failed suicide attempt, which is always, I mean, and it's actually, as fucked up as it is, it's funny. And there's another scene that it's such dark comedy, but I could not stop laughing. It was just so absurdly funny. And long story short, there's a scene where Stanley Moon is trying to make love, and he is crying the entire time.
Yes.
Sounds awful, but it is so fucking hilarious. I could not stop laughing. But all right, let's get to the wishes.
All right. So basically, his first wish is that he decides that he wants to become an intellectual, so he can talk to this woman, Margaret. So he wants to be
articulate.
Yes, he wants to be. Did I say articulate or did I?
No, I threw that word out there. That was my $10 word.
Okay, sorry. I thought I said something really. I don't know. That's all right.
No, you're fine. You're fine.
Okay.
You're fine.
And so he can speak correctly, and he's highly knowledgeable. He has a knowledge base of art and science and biology, and he can talk on any subject. And so anyway, so of course we get the magic words, Julie Andrews. And although before he does do that, he has to hold a bear's claw. He has to put a sparkler in his other hand, and he says to George Spigot, "Am I going to blow up?" And the devil says to him, "No, I just do it for visual effect." So anyway, so we find that he's on a date with Margaret, and everything is going so wonderfully well. He's telling her stories of history and animals and art and music, and she's loving every single minute of it until he makes a move on her, and then everything goes incredibly wrong, and she starts screaming rape, 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 and everybody in the building starts rushing in, and he's there, and of course, so it doesn't go very well.
No, he has to blow a raspberry and move on to the next wish. Yeah, again, they don't make them like this anymore. There's also rape humor in that scene, obviously. But we don't have to expound on it. It doesn't ruin the movie. It's not weird. It's just a different time in filmmaking. But okay, when he becomes articulate, he has like the most garbled Scottish accent. It is so weird.
It's Welsh. It's actually Welsh.
Oh, is that what that was?
Yeah, that's actually Welsh.
Thank you. Okay, I'm gonna update my notes and write Welsh. There we go. So now I know what that sounds like. But yeah, he has this really garbled Welsh accent. It's just hilarious because he goes from just being this regular English, British English speaking dude to now he's got this Welsh accent, and he is a know-it-all. I mean, it gets to the point where he talks a little too fucking much, and you're kind of like, as a person in the audience, you actually are kind of like, come on, dude, make the move. Lean in for a kiss.
Yeah.
But, yeah, unfortunately, Margaret wants you to make love to her ears and not to her body.
Yes.
So.
That's exactly right.
And she has a really annoying hairstyle in that scene. I just have to throw that out there. She has, like, these crazy fake hair braids on either side of her head. It just looks it looks kind of like anime hair. Just, she's got Pokemon on her head. It's just weird. But
and so after his first wish doesn't work, he decides that he'll have a second try. And his second try is that he now wants to be a man with power, with money, that he can buy her anything she wants. He can just swamp her with jewels and luxury. And, of course, it doesn't go right as well. Because we now find out that, of course, the devil is interfering with every wish. So if Stanley hasn't mentioned one little point, the devil will then make that point. So in this case, they make her very promiscuous with other men. And so basically it doesn't matter what he buys her or gives her, she's always off having affairs with other men. So it just doesn't work
it's
at all.
fucked up because it's like in the first wish she wasn't sexual, so in the second wish he's like, I want her to be sexual, and the devil's like, oh, I'll make her very sexual for you. And yeah, like you said, she's sleeping with everybody but him.
I know.
But the part that cracked me up the most was when he busts her in the act, like getting ready to sex it up with who the devil, who else. The way they showed there's a mirror behind the devil's head and you see a set of boobs in the mirror. Just the boobs in the mirror cracked me up. That was so well placed and just so unexpected, just so funny.
Well, it was so well done because you don't even have to see her. That's the beauty of it. You just know it's her, So
right.
It's it is sort of very good. Although the only thing is that they have one character in this scene who has a very bad stammer. And it's a little bit uncomfortable now when you watch it with you, to a degree, because it's but I think it's all set up so he can make one joke. The whole character is done up to make one joke, and that is he's trying to say something. So he's stammering, and it's taking him forever to actually get the comment out. And then the devil just turns around and sort of says, "That's easy for you to say." So it's just it's a setup for really a very bad joke. So I don't know, but
and times have changed. So I guess at the time that was funny, but now it's just kind of like okay.
I mean you set him up like that just so you can make the fun of the thing that it's hard for him to say. So, I don't know, but then again, not every joke is going to work, and times have changed. We're not 1967 anymore.
Isn't that the truth?
Sort of thing.
And thank God. Okay.
So, but then after that, we get his third wish, where he wants to be a rock star. Now he decides because women love rock stars, so Margaret will instantly fall in love with him. Now, I don't know what you thought, Phil, but I thought this was one of the funniest bits of the film.
I love this one. It makes me laugh so hard. Like, first off, the movie goes from color and it switches to black and white, like you're watching an old Top of the Pops, Ed Sullivan, one of those just live television performances that were broadcast in black and white, and it stays in black and white for the entire wish. I thought that was really like a nice touch. And
what's so funny about it is that he comes on and he does his song. He's a great rock star. And Margaret is there screaming for him, wanting to be with him until the second act comes on the show. And now the second act is absolutely hilarious because what is it? Grimble Wedge and the Vegetations.
Oh my God!
Is the name of the band, and of course the lead singer of the band is, guess who? It's the devil.
The devil.
And it's just. Should we just play a little bit of the song?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Anyway, here we go. So just bear with us, people. Here it comes. Anyway, that's probably enough. But it's
Warren, you fill me full of inertia.
Oh, I know. It's a great line. You fill me with inertia. It's just great, and he's just the most depressive singer, and he's got these girls go-go dancing behind him. But of course, the girls fall in love with him, and it's that whole idea that how long does fame last? Because you're only as famous until the next famous person comes along. So, of course, the girls all fall in love with George Spidget and not with Paul Stanley Moon. But it is absolute. But it all seems quite normal, and he's doing his song and all the rest of it. But when George Spidget comes out and does that song, that is just fucking hilarious.
It's just so bizarre, and it's so 60s. You wouldn't have that kind of performance nowadays. It's just he's just standing there dead faced, and towards like the very end of the song, he finally like moves his head and looks in a different direction just for a moment. It's just bizarre, but it is great. He even says, "Oh, pop fans are so fickle nowadays." When finally Stanley's kind of like, "Hey, you're fucking up all my wishes. Like she was in love with me till you got on stage and started singing," and he's like, "I don't know what you're talking about." Like, "I don't mean to. I can't help it, Stanley." So then they have this whole weird frenemy kind of situation going on. But I'll come back to that. We'll stay with our wishes because we got a couple more to go.
Once we finish the wishes, we should talk about Elizabeth. It is a really important part of the movie, all of that.
Absolutely,
So yes, anyway, so after that, the fourth wish, and we should say too, between some of these wishes, as we said, there are all these other things that happen, but we'll talk about them after the wishes. Now, the fourth wish is just lunacy. It's where they're watching Margaret, and she seems to be getting very close with a police inspector when they're investigating, of course, Stanley's death, because, of course, he's now sold his soul. And so anyway, he quickly goes, "Oh, I wish I could be a fly on the wall." And then, of course, George Spidget instantly says, "Julie Andrews!" Julie Andrews! And suddenly we cross to anime, and they're now two flies actually at the morgue watching the conversation between the police inspector and Margaret. And
oh my God.
How the hell he thought this up, I don't know. But it's so ridiculous. It's just hilarious. And of course, it's that cross thing where you've got anime with live action, where they've got the two things together. And it's just until they get attacked by fly spray.
And he has trouble blowing a raspberry as a fly in a little fly's body. Okay, again, I want to just point out really quick, can't make movies like this anymore. That's a very strange scene, not just because they turn themselves into flies so they can spy on this girl that Stanley's in love with, but she's speaking to this inspector, and he starts talking about rape. And he starts victim blaming rape victims. Yeah. And then basically they're implying that he's getting ready to rape the shit out of her. And I'm like, man, wow, you cannot make these kind of movies anymore. I mean, yeah. So again, rape humor. I just have to throw it out there for anybody that's the trigger for. But yeah, it's just so strange. And then that's why Stanley has to fly around the room to distract them. Basically, he prevented her from getting raped by this inspector by being a fly. So I mean, yeah, it's how did they think of this scene? It's really quite amazing.
I know.
And I want to say this before I forget. Yeah. The devil always wears red socks in this movie. And even when they are flies, the devil is wearing red socks.
I know. Oh, dear.
But yeah, you have to see it to believe it, people. It's just so funny and so unexpected when all of a sudden there's cartoon flies in this movie.
Now the next wish goes to where you were talking before about the crying scene. And
oh my God!
He now wishes that he lives in a country cottage with Margaret, and they are totally in love with each other and all the rest of it. But of course, he forgets.
She's married. He says, and she's married.
And she's married, but he doesn't specify that she has to be married to him. So it turns out now that he's having an affair with Margaret, and Margaret is married to the devil.
That's so fucked up.
Oh, God. You know.
And the weird part is that the devil is like the best husband on the face of the planet.
Yes.
He's affectionate, kind, caring, giving, thoughtful, faithful, trusting.
I know.
And it's like, why on fucking earth is she having an affair? Why is she cheating on this perfect man?
But it's just while they're having sex, or they're trying to have sex, and they're in tears, absolutely bawling their eyes out, and all they can talk about is how much of a wonderful man he is and how much they love him. It's just, oh my God.
Oh, poor Stanley Moon just can't get it right. He's finally going to score with his lady. She's in love with him. They're going to have sex, but they cannot stop crying. And again, people, it sounds really fucked up, but you have to see the scene. It is such crazy, dark humor, but it's hilarious. It's laugh out loud funny. It's just really, honestly, one of the most absurd comedic scenes I've ever seen, to be honest. It's just, I've never thought of the combination of, hey, let's have two people trying to have sex, but they can't stop crying. Just on paper, that sounds horrible, but it is so funny. They did it perfectly. They pulled it off. They made it happen.
Now, in the sixth wish, okay, lunacy just takes over here because he finally thinks that he's worked everything out, that he's specified everything, and nothing can go wrong. And of course it does, because he forgot to specify that he had to be a man. So now suddenly he's a woman, and not only that, they're in a nunnery. They turn out
he's a nun in a monastery.
He's a nun, yeah, and but it's not. But the thing is, it's not your ordinary, like, you know how like every monastery or nunnery or whatever has their patron saint or whatever, you know, like
right.
But in this one, the patron saint is the Leaping Order of the Saints of Saint Beryl. Right?
Oh my God!
And Saint Beryl was this made-up saint is this woman who apparently saw God and leaped up in the air to try to touch God. So what they have to do in this order is they trampoline. So they're bouncing up and down on trampolines all the time to recreate the bouncing Saint Beryl. It's just
so absurd. It's so funny, though. Yeah, that's the one that cracked me up. Was right when the wish started, and he was wearing a nun's habit, and he blows a raspberry right when he's like what the fuck? But he's stuck. It doesn't work.
It doesn't work. That's right.
You're like, oh shit, he's stuck as a nun, and now finally Margaret's in love with him, and they live together, but they can never consummate this relationship because they're both nuns, and they've taken a vow of celibacy because they're in the Leaping Order, so they got to go jump on a trampoline.
Now there's two things too about this scene, and that is that first of all, we should just say that this scene was at when the two of them were on a British TV show which was called Not Only But Also, from the 1960s. And this was actually a sketch from that show that they expanded to put into this movie. So they'd actually taken it, and expanded it. The other thing too is that, as you were saying, as soon as he gets there, he blows his raspberry, but he can't get out. For some reason, he can't get out. And wherever he goes, he's continually just blowing raspberries at the most inappropriate times. And everyone's...
They've taken like a vow of silence. He's over there blowing raspberries.
So what he does is so we've still got one more wish to go, of course. There's a seventh wish. So he leaves the nunnery and he races back to the London headquarters of the devil to explain what's gone wrong. I've still got one more wish. To where the devil explains to him that when he first tried to prove that he was the devil, that was his first wish. So this actually is his seventh wish, and he's now trapped as a nun forever. And so, of course, Stanley is not very happy. And this is where the ending of our movie basically then comes about, where the idea is that because now the devil has won his bet with God, and the devil has got to 1 billion souls first, he's going back to heaven, so he gives the soul back I'm going to give it away. It's 1967, right? So
Right.
he gives Stanley Moon his soul back, but of course it goes wrong because he gives it back for the wrong reasons, and of course God doesn't accept that. So, but I don't want to go into too much detail of the ending because it's quite interesting. But so they're basically the 7 wishes that he gets. But then, of course, as you were saying before, Vel, there's all this stuff that happens in between the wishes, which is as funny as the wishes itself. You know?
Yeah, there's so much going on in this movie. I do think some of the wish scenes run a bit long. Like, I think some of them could be a little shorter because this movie is about an hour 45. They could have cut about maybe 10 minutes just because I do think some of the wish scenes run a little long. Like, there's the scene where in the first wish, Stanley and Margaret are talking, and it just gets absurd because she's telling him to close his eyes and touch stuff, and they're just walking around touching stuff with their eyes closed. I mean, I don't know. That got old fast. I was kind of like, okay, it was funny for a second, but now they're still doing it. They're still doing it. They're still doing it. But let's see. Oh, I thought this was funny. The devil always asks for money in the beginning. Like, he always puts Stanley in these positions where he's like, "Hey, you got 6 pence? You got 6 pence?" And there's tons of sexual innuendos. Let's see. Oh, okay. The friendship. That is a really strange. And they did this in Bedazzled 2000, too. The one with Brendan Fraser and Elizabeth Hurley. They kept this theme in both movies, where Stanley is basically saying that no one's ever cared about him like the devil does.
Yes.
You're like, wow, how sad is your life, man? That somebody who's treating you like shit and setting you up for failure at every turn is giving you more attention than you've ever had in your entire life. I mean, wow. And yeah, it's just strange.
It's very interesting because even at the end, even when, you know, he's been done over, he's stuck as a nun for the rest of for eternity, and he doesn't blame the devil. Like, he just sort of accepts that that's the devil's job, and the simple fact is that the devil has shown him more. It has spoken to him more in the time they've been together than anybody else has for his entire life. And he actually cares about the devil. Like, he actually wishes him luck going up to heaven. You know, he wants the devil to get back into heaven. You know, it's like, in a sense, yeah, you're right. His best friend in the world becomes the devil. It's really interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, and you make a great point that, yeah, he doesn't judge him. He accepts that that's what he does. That's his job. He has to cause mischief. He has to constantly lie. Why? Because he's the devil. He can't help it. And there's even a part in the movie where the devil says, I can't help it. It just, for some reason, just makes me laugh. I'm just like, wow, you know, he's right. He can't help it. He's the devil. That's what he does, causes mischief and fucks up people's lives because he has a compulsion to do it. He can't help it.
I mean, it's like some of the places that he will, you know, materialize in between his wishes. I mean, one of the funniest ones is suddenly they're underwater in scuba gear, and the devil is drilling a hole in the side of an oil tanker.
Oh my God.
It's just like some of the weird things. Or he appears on the top of a telegraph or telephone pole, and the devil is purposely cross-connecting calls. You know, and things, and it's just some of them where they go and they visit an old lady, and they try to convince her that she's won a prize, and then con her out of her own money. It's just,
goodness gracious, yeah, he's an evil dude, and it's funny because at first Stanley is appalled at this behavior, but then he just kind of comes to accept it. He's never, like, he stops asking, like, what are you doing? Why are you doing that? Don't you feel bad about that? He's just like, oh, it's the devil. That's what he does. Well,
I was going to say, he even makes the comment to Margaret where when they're in the nunnery and they're sort of talking by telecommunication or something because they can't speak, and he says to Margaret, you know, she's sort of saying she's questioning her vows. She's questioning the existence of God. And Stanley actually says, no, I can guarantee you God is real. And she says, how do you know God is real? And Stanley says, because I've met the devil. I know the devil. And then he actually says, he's not really that bad of a guy. He's kind of just misunderstood. He's even defending the devil to Margaret as being he's not that bad, you know. It's just who he is. He can't control it. He can't help it.
Yeah, and it's funny because they also expound on this. The devil feels victimized. He talks about this, hey, I was an angel, and then he explains his whole position and why he was cast out of heaven. But, of course, we got to follow it up with some comedy because in case people didn't know, the devil lets us know that God is English. Of course he is.
That's a classic line. That's a classic line where he sort of says, you know, that God is omnipresent, God is everywhere. And then Stanley Moon goes, but he is British. And the devil says, oh, of course. Yes, of course he's British. It's just, yeah, I know. Oh, it's classic British humour. You know, that God must be an Englishman, you know?
Yes, absolutely. Oftentimes on the box cover for this movie, we will see a well-known American actress, Raquel Welch, portrayed as Lust. And she has a very short screen time in this movie. So it's interesting how they're selling that sex appeal to get asses in the seats. But she's not in this movie for very long.
No, that's right. But she's one of the 7 deadly sins. And
she's Lust.
Lust. But the other very famous person that they cast in this as another deadly sin was Barry Humphries. Now, if a lot of people don't know who Barry Humphries is, you'll know his alter ego, Dame Edna Everage. And that is Barry Humphries without the makeup and the dresses and all the rest of it. So it was really interesting.
Which sin did he play?
He plays as a jealousy. I think is it jealousy or is it envy?
Yes, envy. Okay, yes, I know now. Okay, he was in the bed. Yeah, he was in the bed wearing green because you're green with envy.
Yeah. And it's talking about how he's got the smallest room in hell and he doesn't have a decent bathroom. And he says, you want to see Lust's bathroom? It's enormous. Come and see mine. It's tiny, you know, and all this sort of stuff. And, so it was interesting that they threw these sorts of cameo, well, they're not really cameos, are they? But these very small roles for who were actually very big, famous people at the time.
That's cool.
You know, so, but it is one of these things I will say about this film is that, unlike some British comedies that we've done before, is that they can be a little bit slow sometimes. But this just keeps hitting you second after second after second with jokes. It doesn't stop.
There's tons of British quips. Just the back and forth banter is very funny. Yeah, it is. It's not dry humor. With Casino Royale, that humor was so dry, I was dehydrated. I just couldn't take it. I was just so bored. And where it was with this, it has that British flavor, but it's not dry. It's very engaging, very funny, and the pacing's quite good.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it is. I do agree with what you said. Some of the scenes were a bit drawn out. They could have been... sorry, not the sins. Some of his wishes maybe could have been cut down a little bit shorter to maybe bring it into an hour and a half. I think that probably would have worked better. I agree with you on that. But it's but the thing is that it just doesn't stop. I mean, that whole idea that the adventures or the wishes are hilarious, but then when he comes back to meet the devil in between, they're just as crazy. You know, like it doesn't stop. It's like when they're on the top of the tower. It was that famous tower in London, the big telecommunications tower, and they're on top of that, and he's releasing pigeons out into the community to basically crap on people. And you know, so.
And that cracked me up because they were calling the bird shit. They were calling it doodah. And for some reason, that just killed me. I've never heard anybody call bird shit doodah before. Well, that just cracked me up. And, okay, whenever the bird did its doodah on that man on the street, was that John Cleese?
No, it wasn't.
It looked like him for half a second. Okay, disregard that question, people. It was one of those where you think it's a certain celebrity, and then I was like, well, Was that him? No, okay, never mind. No Monty Python cameos in this movie.
No. They went to different universities, Velvis. Peter Cook and Dudley Moore went to Oxford. John Cleese is a Cambridge lad.
See, listen to the classism of English society. Listen to this.
Yeah, well, yeah.
Speaking of which, there's a couple of strange lines in this movie that Stanley during his fifth wish, or maybe, during his fifth wish, he says, "We're both young, white, and in perfect health."
Yes, I know. That's kind of hard to deal with now.
Yeah, that's not. And there's also later in the scene, the devil even says something like, "Oh, in your wish, I'll make sure you're Caucasian." And you're like, "Wow, that's kind of shitty."
I know.
It's kind of a shitty thing to say, people.
I know. I mean, my only thing to say about that is 1967.
1967, exactly.
Exactly. It's blatantly racist. There's no doubt about it.
Big time. Yeah, it's kind of surprising. It's like, oh man, okay, but yeah, 1967. Obviously, you wouldn't say that kind of stuff in movies today if you don't want to alienate your audience.
No. Well, it's the interesting thing is in the remake in 2000, of course, they make God black. Which is
they made the devil in female form. So, I mean, yeah.
So look, there are a lot of differences, but it's a bit like a lot of these films, we talk about that. Yes, if they had have said that stuff today, it would be appalling. But we've got to put it in context of the time. It's horrible to basically say that being white is better than being black. I mean, it's just a lunatic argument that makes no sense whatsoever. But, of course, in 1967, well, I hate to say this, Velvet, but there are people today who still think that. Oh,
absolutely. Oh, I'm a biracial woman. Believe me, I've heard it all.
Yeah, yes.
I've heard it all. And it can be really shocking sometimes. But just want to throw that out there for anybody else that watches this movie and kind of be like, they didn't mention anything about the racism. Okay, we've mentioned it. It was 1967. It's not enough to ruin the movie. And it was just, it was just a different time.
Yes, yeah, it is. I mean, I know. But look, I mean, there are these little faults like that. I mean, there's all. I mean, that racist comment that comes out. There's a lot of sexism in this. Huge amount of sexism in this.
Oh God,
and the concept too that. Like with the rape joke sort of thing and things like that, it is very much a movie of its time. But don't let those things put you off this movie because we're only talking about a couple of comments throughout the film. The rest of the film doesn't deal with that sort of stuff at all. It's just, it's pure, funny fantasy. I think the only people who might really get pissed off with this movie is that if you're very devoutly religious, you might have a problem with the fact that the devil is being treated as a nice person, in a sense that the devil is being treated in a comic sort of way. So if you're incredibly devout, you might have an issue with that. But then again, I would hope that you might be open-minded and just remember this is a comedy. It's satire. They're playing with lots of different ideas, So, maybe we can all be open-minded to that.
Exactly, absolutely. And speaking of being offended, at the time this movie was made, blasphemy was still like a common, law in the UK. And, British film censors would, knock films for that. But they managed to defend this film, and they claimed that they even pre-screened it to a London rector and an archdeacon of Westminster Abbey, and both of them took no offense to the film. So the film was able to drop any blasphemy cases against it, and it was even able to secure a PG rating.
Well, there you go. But if you think about it, the devil doesn't win in this.
No, he doesn't.
He doesn't
God
win.
laughs at him. God mocks him.
He mocks him.
God mocks him.
Yeah. So
and you don't really get to see God in this movie. because God's omnipresent.
That's right.
There's just a presence of God in this movie. So God does make an appearance, but you know how God is. He's kind of camera shy, so we don't get to actually see him, but we get to hear him laugh, mocking the devil towards the end of the film. And
it's the one scene where they're in the van, and the two of them are in the van, and they're getting changed. And he's talking about, and he says, and he's going, yeah, God's omnipresent. He's everywhere. He's in the air. He's in here. He's there. He's whatever. And then he suddenly just yells out, "Get out of the van! I'm changing."
Yeah, that was actually pretty funny. And then he actually prays to God for some privacy. I mean, it is really quite comical. This movie is so funny. And it really approaches religion and the devil in a way that most films never approach either of these subjects. It's really funny. It's really witty, really well written, just so funny.
It really is, and I mean, how you said that you enjoyed the 2000 remake. How would you compare the two, though?
Yeah, the 2000 remake's definitely more of obviously it's more of a safe thing. Like in that one, God does make an appearance, but I don't know. It doesn't talk about why the devil is the devil, where the devil came from. That devil used to be Lucifer. Like, it doesn't get into the whole theology of why the devil is there and what they're doing. It's definitely more of a comedy, just as this one is a comedy too. God, I don't know. It's just, as I said before, it's got that Hollywood flavor. When I say that, I mean it's very mainstream. Yeah. I mean, there's no racism, there's no sexism, maybe I shouldn't say that. Although they do address penis size in the 2000 remake. Yes. He does wish for a big ding dong, but then he gets a big ding dong and a little brain, so that didn't work out too well. So, I mean, I love the 2000 one because I also love Brendan Fraser. That's when he was still in his heyday and still, like, making really fun films. And it's actually more of a romantic comedy. Like, this one, even though his motivation in the Bedazzled 1967 version, although his motivation for the wishes is to gain the love of this one woman, it's not like a romantic comedy. Whereas the Bedazzled 2000 definitely has more of that romantic comedy flavor to it. And I don't know. I think they're both really fun to watch. Whereas Bedazzled 1967 is more witty. I guess you could say Bedazzled 2000, it's just more of a comedy, but it's more silly. It's not witty comedy. It's just really silly. And I don't know. I just like it. I like both.
Well, I think the one of the interesting things about the original version is that we get the lunacy of the wishes, but then we also get this thing that, one, we start to understand a lot about George Spigot, the devil, who he is, where he's come from, the way his mind works. But we also, with Stanley Moon, start to learn more about him, and we get to see him slowly develop as a person. And in a sense that, Stanley Moon, because in the very end, Stanley Moon will have a discussion with the devil when he's, I won't go into any more detail than that, but we suddenly realise that his time spent with George Spigot has actually made a person out of him. He suddenly now realises that life isn't meant to be easy. That sometimes you've got to work hard at things. You've got to fight for things. You've got to, like, life is not meant to be just handed to you on a plate. And he learns that message by spending time with the devil. And so in many ways, the devil saves his life. It's kind of crazy the way it works.
Yeah, it is. It is. And the ending is kind of, it's not just, it's open-ended. It's a little bit ambiguous, but it's not an unsatisfactory ending. It doesn't leave you feeling like you don't have closure. It doesn't give you the predictable ending of, he gets the girl of his dreams, end of story. They don't do that. But I love the ending though. It's very just different. It's not what you expect, but it doesn't leave you feeling cheated.
Yeah, I'd agree. I totally agree. Totally agree. All right. Well, I think we should probably start to wrap it up as we've been going on so long this podcast.
Oh my God. Yeah, I just now saw the time. Okay. Okay. Bedazzled.
If we're going to rate
Funny.
it.
Sorry.
Yes.
Okay. Rating. Okay. Yeah. Bedazzled 1967. Funny. British humor. Seeing a very young Dudley Moore and a prematurely deceased Peter Cook. He left us way too early in this world. You guys got to check this out. Very funny. They have great comedic chemistry in this movie. Really unexpected how good this was. You'd always told me how funny this was. I had no clue it was really that funny. Okay, out of a possible 5, Eric Roberts, I'm going to go ahead and give this 4.5.
Well, I'm going to give it exactly the same because I would give it a 5, but I think that some of the points we've brought up about certain jokes a few decades ago are just kind of really inappropriate now. So otherwise I would have given it a 5, to be honest. But yeah, so I'll give it a 4.5. I think it's very funny, and it's kind of poignant and has a message at the same time. So
absolutely,
it's a really, really good film. It's a great way just to escape for an hour and 45 minutes. But at the same time, by the time it's over, you sort of realise, hey, there was actually a bit of a message in that. So, yeah, I think it's great. And the whole thing was, if it wasn't for Peter Cook's writing, this movie just would not be what it is. It was his genius as a comedy writer that makes this film, and also the chemistry that Peter Cook and Dudley Moore have together. I mean, they worked with each other for so long, and it just shows. They work so well together, and it also makes me say to anybody else, if you do watch this and you like it, check out some of their old TV shows, like A Bit of Pete and Dud, and and all that sort of stuff that they did for the BBC, because they're hilarious. They're basically like these little. It's them doing sketch comedy, and it's hilarious. So probably check that out as well. Excellent.
Absolutely, definitely.
Excellent. All right. Well, I think it's time to wrap up.
All right, yeah, this was a good one. Look at this. We went to heaven and hell, and then we had rock and roll. Somehow this all ties together. So, yeah. All right, go ahead and follow us on our social media, especially on Twitter at Cult Movie Show. Go ahead and follow us, and we will make an effort to follow back. Feel free to tweet us any movies that you'd like us to review, any short films, independent films. Feel free to tweet us or private message us your short film or independent film. We would be happy to review it and have you on, talk about your film. You can also email us, cultmovieshow@gmail.com. All right, Warren, take it away.
Yeah, I think that's about it. That's the lot. So we'll be back next week with 55. Is that right?
Yeah.
55. We'll be back with 55. So we have no idea what films we're going to do. We'll work that out during the week. And we've got some ideas, though. We've always got some amazing ideas. Oh yeah. And we'll try to stay on topic, and I won't go down the path of talking about biblical studies again. I cannot believe I got so distracted and started talking about the history of the writing of the Bible. Anyway, so I do apologise for that. So anyway, that's been number 54. We'll be back with my mouth is getting so dry. Number 55 next week. So thanks for tuning in, and we'll speak to you next week.
All right, till then.
No worries. Cheers, guys.